In the dark dungeon, among the skulls and snaking creatures, there was an ominous silence, broken only by a strange, hoarse laugh. One of the mysterious characters reported that the sacrifice was already in place. The creatures in the shadows confirmed that those they were waiting for had arrived. As the intruders entered the room, one of the enemies in the shadows activated a pre-prepared scroll. At the signal, the goblins tightly closed the massive doors, cutting off the escape route. A thick haze began to spread quickly from the air. The trap was activated. One of the participants in the plan calmly watched what was happening, explaining that it was a poisonous cloud. It was a third-level spell. Poison Cloud. It was activated by voice, and now it was deadly, filling a 9-meter zone. Those who could not resist its effects began to choke and cough. Even the more resilient creatures who managed to make a saving throw continued to take damage with each round. One of the mages loudly declared that it was he who cast the spell, and at this time their allies were already giving the command to destroy the invaders without mercy. The prisoners tried to open the locked doors in panic, but all efforts were in vain. The passage remained closed. One of the magicians reported that 3 minutes had passed, watching what was happening with cold calm. After a deadly lull, a shrill scream pierced the silence from the cloud of poison. One of the survivors crawled across the floor in panic, breathing heavily and barely holding on to life. Meanwhile, the mysterious robed figure slowly approached, each step echoing in the empty hall, bringing the inevitable reckoning closer. The frightened goblin, gasping in horror, cursed the stranger. However, the mysterious hooded stranger came close and broke his staff with one sharp movement. Looking forward with determination, he wondered if he did not decide to act now. The same fate awaits them as those who fell before them. The hero entered the hall where the bodies of women were mercilessly dumped at the altar. The sight left no doubt about the cruelty of what was happening. Among the horrific picture, one of the surviving goblins in desperation tried to negotiate. He offered treasures, even kidnapped women just to save himself. But in response, he said to shut up and the order to go to hell. When the goblin tried to beg for mercy, one of the girls silently raised her bow and shot him in the head with a well-aimed shot. Together with her partner, they joined their leader without further ado. He glanced at the fallen body and calmly said that it was time to move on, and all three headed deeper into the dark dungeon. When the iron bars opened with a crash, the girls in the cell froze in tense anticipation. Convinced that the savior was in front of them, they joyfully rushed to meet him. With tears and cries of gratitude, they surrounded the hero, thanking him for saving their lives. After freeing the captives, the hero clenched his fist, realizing that the one he was looking for was not among the rescued again. Sana was still out of reach. Despite the gratitude and attention of those around him, he turned around without a word and walked away, disappearing into the forest, leaving behind an alarming trail of disappointment and determination to move on. Against the backdrop of a majestic landscape with soaring cliffs and dense forests, the inner monologue of a young man sounded. He found himself in a world full of swords and magic in the so-called eternal world. Just a few weeks ago, he was an ordinary schoolboy, but suddenly he found himself drawn into a new, unfamiliar reality. The boy had just completed a difficult level in the game, with magical restrictions. His younger sister happily ran into the room, enthusiastically threw herself into his arms and praised him. This is exactly what she expected from her older brother. He, slightly embarrassed, noted that the game really turned out to be fun. The sister, slightly embarrassed, asked her brother to cook something to eat. He happily agreed, and she chose paella. Over dinner, they chatted about the difficulty of the games, and she admitted that she found playing with limitations much more interesting. Sana joked that it was more fun to play with her brother, not because of the restrictions. Yukito introduced her as his younger sister, a smart girl, an athlete, and the student council president. He is 16 years old, she is 14, and he thinks that being able to spend time with such a cute sister, the best that can be. When he stopped going to school, he remembered the day when Sana quietly came up to him and, looking at him tenderly, asked permission to play together. These words sounded simple, but meant a lot to him. He recalled that Sana was the only person who accepted him unconditionally. It didn't matter to him what might happen to him as long as she was safe. When he offered to cook her something later, she happily chose pancakes. Then, as if nothing special had happened, the girl went to her room to continue studying, even on the weekend. Before leaving, Sana asked her brother with a smile to make another dish with an extra portion of cream to restore his strength after studying. He happily agreed, promising to make a tube with fruit as well. After that, she promised to join him in the game as soon as she finished her studies. Yukito, in turn, said that he would try to return to the game with new restrictions. The idea seemed quite good to him. He remembered how Sana was always there to support him, no matter how he spent his time at home or what was going on at school. She always looked at him with a smile and once told him that she was happy to be his sister. In response, he thought the same thing, that he was glad that she was his sister. He hugged his sister tightly, thinking about how sweet she was and how much he loved her, because she was the most important part of his world. But suddenly everything changed. Although it was daytime, it suddenly became dark outside. This seemed strange, and he looked anxiously towards the window, feeling that something was wrong approaching. The sudden darkness turned into a real nightmare. A huge monster with a terrifying grin appeared outside the window. He couldn't believe his eyes, trying to comprehend how this was even possible. At that very moment, he screamed, telling Sonya to run, because in 1 second all the calm collapsed, replaced by a deadly threat. The glass shattered into pieces as the monster burst in. Yukito, without wasting a second, grabbed Sana's hand and tried to pull her away from danger. In a desperate attempt to protect Sana, he rushed forward, shielding her with his body. The next moment, the sharp blade of the monster pierced his body. He felt everything slow down, and pain spread across his chest. But despite this, he continued to hug his sister tightly even in this terrible moment, thinking only about saving her. Yukito felt himself falling into endless darkness. He could see nothing. Only cold and emptiness surrounded him. His thoughts were racing. Soon, someone's voice rushed through the darkness, calling him by name. The stranger said with regret that Yukito had died. Yukito woke up in a strange, empty space, confused and still shaken by what had happened. A voice told him that his death was an accident. Surprised, he heard that this being had decided to take pity on him. As a second chance, he was offered reincarnation, a new life in another world. He saw a mysterious woman sitting on a throne in front of him, and heard from her that he was now in a certain eternal world. Hearing this, he asked himself in confusion what kind of place this was, and what the word eternal meant. The woman explained to Yukito that he was now in another world, a place filled with magic and monsters, where the gods rule. Introducing herself as Nephilia, the goddess of truth and justice, she clarified that the people of his world simply called this place, quote, another world. Yukito was surprised to realize that he was speaking with an actual goddess. Yukito immediately asked about Sana, worried about her fate. The goddess answered that his younger sister was fine, and he breathed a sigh of relief. But then she reminded him that despite this, he himself was dead. In an instant, the scene of the tragedy flashed in his mind, and he again felt the full horror of what had happened. Yukito realized that he would never be able to see Sana again. He clutched the cloth on his chest, feeling the pain of loss, but also relief that he had managed to protect what was most precious to him. He wondered if he had fulfilled his duty as an older brother. Seeing that he was beginning to understand the essence of what was happening, the goddess decided to explain to him what would happen next. The goddess explained to Yukito that in front of him was the Book of the World, a sacred artifact that contained all the information about the eternal world, from the highest mountains to the deepest seas, from the thoughts of infants to the desires of madmen. She added that the book was written by the gods themselves, and when he was reborn, he would become a full-fledged inhabitant of this world. Yukito was surprised to recognize himself in one of the entries. The goddess explained that in order to finally enter Yukito into the Book of the World, it was necessary to let fate determine his characteristics. After that, throwing a crystal cube, she announced that his intelligence was 17. Yukito noticed that everything the scribe wrote with his pen was immediately reflected in the book. The goddess explained that he had quickly figured out what was happening and suggested that his intelligence had been quite high in his past life. She congratulated him, adding that he would be able to use his mental abilities in his new life. The goddess said that the agility was 13, the average result, as was the endurance. When Yukito asked what happened, she said that everything had already been decided. Then she added that as a blessing, he could choose one item from the list. Yukito was surprised to see that the list of items was very generous. He thought that a sword for self-defense would not be suitable for him, but an elixir that could heal any wounds and illnesses sounded very useful. Yukito noted to himself that all the artifacts looked powerful, and any of them would probably be useful. He decided to choose a magic staff, because he always played as a mage in games. As soon as Yukito made his choice, the goddess wasted no time in activating the magic ritual. A stream of light and energy surrounded him, and the next second he disappeared, rushing through space. In the other world, meanwhile, someone noticed the sudden flash of light and reacted with a cry of fear at his unexpected appearance. Yukito felt a strange force engulfing his entire body. He couldn't resist. It felt like a funnel sucking him into the void. Yukito noted to himself that the staff began to gradually materialize, and one of the attendants calmly explained, as if the creation of an artifact takes time and costs a little weight. The guy wondered in surprise. Was it really all that was required of him now? Yukito's gaze fell on the Book of Peace again, as if he was trying to make sure that all this was really happening. The hero wondered if he would really just take and be reborn in another world. He understood that he was going to a place where Sana would not be, and with this thought a longing arose in his heart. He admitted that he could not read the book lying in front of him, and in the silence he whispered, "He wants to see Sana." When the book suddenly glowed, Yukito squinted at the bright light, wondering what was going on. Then he picked up the book. Yukito grabbed the goddess by the shoulders in panic, not understanding what was happening. He couldn't hold back his scream, demanding to know what all this meant and why she was here, even though she told him to wait. He exclaimed why Sana's name was in the book, not believing his eyes. It seemed impossible to him that his little sister was somehow also connected to this other world. He stated that he had recognized Sana unmistakably and could recognize her anywhere. He then reminded the goddess that she had previously assured him that everything was fine with Sana. The hero reminded the goddess that she had claimed that the book contained all the information about the eternal world, and that for reincarnation it was necessary to determine the characteristics. Seeing the page with Sana, he concluded that she had died and had also been transferred to this world. The boy demanded that the goddess answer his question and return the book, shouting that he wanted to know the truth. She responded by coldly stating that the book was not meant for mortals like him, and tried to take it back. When the ground began to crumble, he leaped forward despite the chaos, determined that he could not let the book go to waste. After all, it contained information about San, and he could not let it go. She screamed at him to stop immediately, calling him an insolent brat, and told him not to touch her precious Book of Peace. Yukito said that if this is really another world, then so be it, he is ready. He will use any means necessary to stay alive. He promised that wherever she was, he would definitely find her. Yukito believed that the only clue that could lead him to his sister was the Book of Peace, an artifact that contained all the information about the eternal world. He told himself that he had to get to her no matter what. Despite the danger, he was determined, mentally promising Sana that he would definitely find her, no matter where she was. Despite his determination and courage, the boy still did not understand what exactly he was drawn into. He headed to another world with complete confidence, holding the mysterious Book of Peace in his hands, but did not suspect what severe trials awaited him ahead. As he fell, he was amazed to see the ground approaching. In a panic, he tried to understand what was happening, but after flying through the treetops, he finally fell into the foliage. Numb, he could only think that he had miraculously survived. Looking around, he noticed that he was in a clearing surrounded by trees. In his world, this place might have seemed like an ordinary park. However, now, looking at the huge moons in the sky, he realized that the eternal world had truly opened up before him. Convinced of this, he recognized that he was now definitely in another world. He confirmed that he had indeed been reincarnated. Opening the Book of the World, he saw Sana's image again and realized it was true. She had also been reincarnated into this world. Realizing this, he breathed a sigh of relief, but immediately wondered about her whereabouts. After all, her location was not indicated in the book. The hero found that Sana's data page showed her current location as the capital city of Reinhardt. He thought that if he went there, he might be able to find her. He was surprised and pleased that the Book of Peace automatically translated the text into Japanese, which turned out to be quite useful. Turning the page, he noticed that there was more to it. Scrolling further, he came across his own page and was surprised to find that he only had one hydrogen phosphide, which made him think about how weak he was and how careful he needed to be in this world. He realized that falling from a height of 6 meters, about the same as from the roof of a 2-story building, would cause random damage, calculated on a 10-sided die. He thought that he was lucky when he fell, and now he would have to be much more careful. Looking at Sana's data, he was relieved to see that she was at least stronger than him. He continued studying the Book of the World and learned that his class was a wizard, while Sana's was a cleric. He tried to understand what this meant and wondered what abilities he had. Even though he had managed to find out Sana's location, much of this world remained a mystery to him. The boy was indignant at why he only had 1 hydrogen phosphide, and he realized that moving forward without a plan was too risky. While staying overnight in the forest did not seem like a smart idea either, he was at a loss. The hero realized that, no matter what this new world was, he first needed to gather as much information as possible. Although it would take time, he had no other choice. He decided to study the Book of Peace, because it was in it, in his opinion, that the only way to survive and meet Sana again was contained. Yukito thought that if he followed this path, he would be able to reach the road. Opening the Book of the World, he was again amazed by its capabilities. Whenever he wanted to know something, the book itself opened to the desired page, displaying the necessary information. Seeing a strange fruit, he read in the book that it was edible. The fruit tasted like an orange, although it looked like an apple. This pleasantly surprised him. He noticed a medicinal plant and decided to collect some, thinking it might be useful. The book also pointed out the local flora, fauna, and terrain. Soon he heard rustling sounds and saw snow rabbits, forest dwellers with a timid nature. After reading the description in the book, he noted that they were popular among humans and demi-humans. He was again amazed at how magical the book was. The language automatically adjusted to his desires, allowing him to read everything in Japanese. The young man tried to grab the rabbit, but it turned out to be aggressive and suddenly attacked. The hero realized that if he got even 1 wound, he would die instantly, because he only had 1 HP, and he ran away from fear. At the same time, he thought about how Sana would react to such a situation. She would probably laugh. He wondered if she was scared, if she was hurt somewhere. He wondered if Sana understood the situation she was in, because she had always been smart and quick-witted since childhood. The boy continued to think about the possibilities of the Book of Peace. Although the book could provide general information about a person, all personal data remained vague. He understood that even if he really wanted to know more about Sana, nothing new would appear except for the already known page. He was curious about why Sana was in the capital. Lost in his thoughts, he did not notice how he found himself surrounded by creatures. The guy found himself surrounded by creatures with a terrifying appearance. Armed, wary, but talking. He noted to himself with amazement that these monsters communicated with each other as if they were intelligent. One of them said that he was a man, and the others noticed that he was watching them. His presence made them uneasy. Someone even asked if he was hurt. This confused, the monsters sympathized. Although the creatures were frightening in appearance, the boy still hoped that they could give him at least some information. He tried to establish contact by asking their names, and noticed that one of them inquired about his condition. It seemed that a conversation might start between them, but a sudden evil grin distorted the face of one of the monsters, dispelling his illusions. The next moment, the creature rushed at him with fury, and before he could react, the blow knocked him off his feet, knocking the most important book out of his hands. The boy realized with horror that he had fallen into a trap. These creatures had pretended to be friendly from the very beginning, but in reality, they were only waiting for the moment to attack. He found himself surrounded by a crowd of goblins, who mockingly laughed at him, beating and humiliating him. Gritting his teeth, he mentally cursed his naivete. At that moment, the Book of Peace that had fallen nearby opened and confirmed his guess. Before him were indeed goblins, evil, underdeveloped creatures who never act alone. The boy realizes the gravity of the situation. The book confirms his worst fears. Goblins are inherently evil by nature. Despite their weakness, they commit cruel acts for their own pleasure. The creatures' faces show only one thought: to hurt, to maim, to kill. One of them approaches, swinging with the clear intention of striking. The goblins surrounding the boy were shouting furiously their intent to either kill him or cripple him first, as if they would get more pleasure from it. One of them had already raised his sword, preparing to strike. At that moment, the image of a smiling Sana appeared before the boy's eyes, and in his thoughts he desperately called out to her, as if hoping that it would help him stay on the edge. He couldn't believe that he had been reincarnated only to die like this before he had even come close to the goal of her search. The goblins became wary as they heard footsteps approaching. One of them growled and asked who dared to appear. A cloaked figure emerged from the shadows of the forest, and at that moment the boy heard someone firmly say that protecting the weak and eradicating evil was the duty of everyone who had taken an oath to serve the gods. The paladin, introducing herself as Charlotte, the third daughter of Duke Bronia, declared that she could not allow violence on their clan's territory. She approached the boy and, holding out her hand, calmly asked if he was injured anywhere. Charlotte, breathing heavily from the sudden interruption, asked the boy to leave this place as quickly as possible. Then, turning to the enemies, with anger in her voice, she declared that she was going to judge the vile goblins with her holy sword. The young man watched in confusion, not understanding what exactly he had just seen. Meanwhile, Charlotte, exhausted from the battle, could barely stand on her feet. Despite her spectacular spins and loud statements, she struggled to cope with her fatigue and eventually sank to her knees. The young man was leafing through the Book of Peace and came across a page related to the girl. He saw that her strength was 7, but with a reduction of 2. He wondered if it was even less than his. Meanwhile, Charlotte, trembling and out of breath, tried to justify herself. The sword turned out to be too heavy. She couldn't handle the weight of the weapon, despite her spectacular appearance. The young man mentally noted, "How is that possible? She came out so pompously and fights terribly with the sword." The boy begged the goblins to stop beating the girl. He didn't know what to do, and he realized with horror that if things continued like this, she might die. Inside, he noticed that no matter how she looked, she was clearly not okay. The girl, despite the blows, insisted that she was fine, and asked him to use this moment to escape. He recalled the girl's words about running away right now. He had no weapons or other means of defense, only 1 point of health. He knew that if he tried to run away, if the goblins caught him, he would definitely be beaten half to death, or worse. The image of him being dead flashed brightly in his head. The thought squeezed him from the inside, but he breathed heavily, still wondering if it was worth the risk. The hero thought he had to find Sana as soon as possible. His gaze slid over the page of the book, confirming her location. He sighed in relief, but a sudden cry and sharp movement caught his attention. A goblin jumped out from behind the trees, clutching Pa's weapon. He knew that if he wanted to survive, he had no choice but to run. He suddenly took off and ran away from the goblins. They laughed at his flight, assuring each other that the man was too weak and was running away. The goblins were talking among themselves, discussing what to do with the captured woman. One of them said that she would become a slave, and another added that her armor would be removed. Hearing this, the girl realized with horror what awaited her. Everything inside her shrank from fear. Suddenly, the goblins became wary. Someone was approaching. The guy exclaimed, asking if she was okay, and told her to come to her senses and get up. He asked in surprise, why did he come back? The boy, breathing heavily, admitted that he really wanted to run away, but still asked the girl if she really wanted to die. She did not answer, only silently looked at him. At this time, the goblins began their attack, declaring that they would kill not only the people, but also the horse. The boy watched in horror as the horse suddenly reared up, letting out a loud neigh. It leaped forward, knocking the goblins down with its hooves. The clash of weapons and chaos engulfed the battlefield, as the goblins tried to defend themselves from the animal's powerful attack. The horse did not slow down, kicked the goblin with incredible force, causing him to fly away. After him, another howled in panic, having received hooves in the chest. While the enemies fell one after another, one of the goblins, in rage, ordered to kill them as quickly as possible. The goblins, stunned by the unexpected attack, scattered. One of them, in a panic, admitted that he was scared and immediately ran away. The others followed suit, leaving behind scattered weapons and the fallen bodies of their comrades. The hero was amazed to see how dazzling the horse looked at that moment. The goblins, stunned by the sight, froze with wide eyes before running away with cries of terror. The hero wondered why Charlotte had appeared with such useless equipment when she had neither the strength nor the skill to use it. He flipped through the Book of Peace and noticed that her equipment list included a, quote, a war horse. This explained why the horse, which usually only listened to its master, responded to Charlotte's name. In the end, thanks to her, they were able to defeat the goblins. Charlotte introduced herself again, explaining that she was the third daughter of Duke Brown and a holy knight. She then thanked the young man, adding that she had been saved thanks to him and Rocinante. The boy thanked Rocinante, saying that he had also been saved. Charlotte admitted that she had previously shown inappropriate behavior and added that since childhood, the horse had recognized only her. He noted that he and Rocinante were really good friends, and when she petted the animal, the boy thought that she was really cute. The guy asked how strong this horse was, and when he saw its characteristics, he was amazed. According to him, Rocinante's strength reached 20 points, and she also had high agility and combat power. He admitted that he was even inferior to her. Then he noticed that, among other things, she also had high intelligence and charisma. The guy introduced himself as Kirihara Yukito. He noted that thanks to the skill linguistics, he has no difficulty communicating even with goblins. Upon hearing his name, the girl said that it sounded strange, after which she repeated his name with interest. At the same time, the guy was very embarrassed and mentally noted that this was the first time he was so close to the girl's face, not counting Sana. The girl, in turn, asked where he was from, because his clothes also seemed unusual to her. He admitted that he was too weak to fight, and if he was attacked by a monster again, he might die. At this rate, he thought he would never find Sana. He hoped to find something useful in the book. At this point, the girl explained that it was dangerous to move around here alone due to the problems with order, and so they had to rest before continuing on. Yukito was thinking in confusion. He knew that this girl was his benefactor, and everything inside him told him not to do what he was thinking about. However, looking at her page in the book, he recognized that he had no choice. He clenched his teeth, preparing to make a decision. At this time, Charlotte, unaware of his internal struggle, turned to him and said that she wanted to ask him a question, because he, according to her, was a holy knight. The hero said that he and his sister had been attacked by a monster and had been separated ever since. He added that he was very far from his hometown and did not know what to do. He had no money, no equipment, no other things, only one book remained with him. He asked, "Will he help me find his sister?" Yukito desperately confessed that he wanted to find his sister as soon as possible, but he couldn't do it alone. He begged Charlotte to help him. Charlotte stood up calmly and assured Yukito that she would help him. She reminded him that it was the duty of a holy knight to help those who truly needed it. The young man thanked Charlotte, calling her his savior. She replied that his sister was probably somewhere near the capital, although she did not know the exact location. Then they decided to go to the city of Orpida first, since the capital was too far away. Yukito thought about Charlotte, noting that, as written in the book, she was kind and fair, believing in the god of love and justice. Although her character could cause a lot of trouble, in the current situation, her kindness would be especially valuable. However, he was not going to rely on her strength. Her personal qualities were more important to him. He thought that he only had the book and this girl, and there was no point in thinking about what would come of it. He understood that there was nothing he could do about it. He had to find Sana. Charlotte said with confidence that God would definitely help them, and suggested that they make every effort together. Yukito admitted that he had no choice but to rely on the Holy Knight and her horse. He felt indebted to Charlotte, and hopefully said that he was looking forward to working with her. The hero, dumbfounded by the new information, thought, if the curse of the evil goddess Nephilia really exists, and her character is chaos and savagery, then how can she be the goddess of justice? He heard something like this for the first time, and was clearly confused. From the moment he arrived in this world, Yukito began to notice the peculiarities of the surrounding reality. He realized that the book he had received allowed him to see the status of other people and understand the laws of this world. He thought that the more he explored, the more information he would be able to discover, but for now, despite everything, his thoughts remained on San. Yukito thought that his class was a wizard, a so-called mage. Unlike the games he had played before, he couldn't just use spells like explosions. It all depended on his magic level. First-tier spells could only be used 3 times a day, and they could only be restored after sleeping. Charlotte the Holy Knight and her warhorse, Rocinante, were walking nearby, but at that moment, a suspicious rustling sound was heard from the forest. someone appeared. The boy noticed that goblins had appeared in the forest again, and he wondered anxiously if this was their habitat. One of the goblins shouted that there was a human in front of him and ordered him to be killed immediately. At that moment, Charlotte, without hesitation, delivered a crushing blow from her horse, easily throwing the enemy back. He mentally noted how powerful it was. Yukito realized that an enemy had appeared right in front of him. He thought that this was a great opportunity to finally test the results of his research. He raised his hand and prepared to cast a spell, thinking that the time had come to act. At that moment, a bright light erupted around him. The young man knew that in order to cast the spell, he had to remember it well. He concentrated, trying to control his gestures and his inner state. He understood that if he made even the slightest mistake when activating it, the spell simply would not work. His heart froze in concentration, and inhaling, he said, "Blue light." He gathered his strength in his gestures and said to himself that the flow of energy should take the form of an arrow and pierce the enemy. His gaze was focused, and his voice was full of determination. Yukito cast a first-tier spell, mentally activating the magic bolt. He knew it required a voice, a gesture, and a tiny stone, and at that moment, his arrow of light pierced the target without hindrance. The hero was relieved to find that he had managed to use magic, and was surprised to realize that he was receiving experience points for his actions. He thought that the things he had gotten from the goblin might be useful, so he decided to take them. Yukito looked at the object in his hand with disgust and wondered what he was doing. However, he convinced himself that it was all for the sake of survival and finding Sana. Charlotte noticed that Yukito could already see what was ahead and happily pointed it out. The characters arrived at the fortress city of Orbieta. Although it is not the capital, they noticed that it is the largest city in the area. Yukito and Charlotte approached the massive gates of Orbieta. He noted to himself how large they were, while the guard watched them closely. When the guard asked for access, Charlotte calmly showed her family crest. The guard immediately recognized the brownie emblem and, apologizing for his rudeness, ordered them to be escorted to the station barracks. Yukito realized that she belonged to a noble family. The boy noticed that the robe was just his size. He thought that his previous clothes had stood out anyway, so now everything was fine. However, he wondered what Charlotte was doing, since she had asked him to change and wait in the castle. Yukito noted with admiration that this city was truly a fantasy. He looked around with delight, surprised by everything that was happening, and did not even immediately notice that he began to attract the attention of passers-by. The boy thought about how unfamiliar this world seemed, the shops he had never seen before, the people he had never encountered. His home world was so different from this one. The hero thought with enthusiasm about how he wanted to show all this to Sanya, but when he opened the Book of the World, he was surprised to find that he could not see its location. He was shocked and could not understand why this happened, wondering if this was a mistake of the book itself. Yukito continued to flip through the Book of the World, hoping to find clues, and was surprised to find a detailed map of the area in front of him. He guessed that this was most likely a navigation section that would help him navigate the new world and perhaps bring him closer to finding Sana. As Yukito looked at the map and thought about Sana, a new page suddenly opened. He noticed a strange icon and assumed that it might be related to her location. However, the image was unclear, and he wondered if it really was Sana. Then where was she now? His thoughts were interrupted by Charlotte, who spoke to him with concern. The young man was taken aback, seeing Charlotte in a new outfit. She said she had changed, and he blushed and thought how cute she was. The hero noted to himself that Charlotte was indeed sweet, as befits a charming 17-year-old girl. He was surprised that there was no one so sweet at his school, and then he asked why, being a noble lady, she was alone in the forest. Charlotte explained that her grandfather was a famous knight nicknamed Dragon Slayer, and became so famous that the Lord himself acknowledged him. She explained that she had set out on a journey to inherit his fighting skills and become a holy knight who protects the weak. She also added that meeting Yukito was probably part of a divine plan. Yukito thought that she had quite ambitious goals. Yukito thought that Charlotte's agility was wasted on such heavy armor, and the sword she was carrying was only a normal +2 magic longsword according to his data, and she did not have enough strength to use it effectively. However, Charlotte told him that the sword was an heirloom of the Brownie family that killed the dragon, so she never parted with it. At this moment, they came to the place Yukito wanted to visit. Charlotte explained that they had come to the Adventurers Guild because it was, in her words, the best place to gather information. The guild was responsible for registering and managing the activities of adventurers in the fortress city. Inside, there were representatives of different races and professions, creating an atmosphere of a lively and potentially useful space for exploration. Yukito thought that the Adventurers Guild would be a good place to find out about both Sana's location and how to return to his world. He noted that there were many different races there, including elves and dwarves, and that it was the fastest place to gather information. He also hoped that if he and Charlotte became famous as adventurers, Sana would notice them. At that moment, the receptionist approached them, thinking that they had a cute customer. Yukito and Charlotte declared that they wanted to become adventurers. At this, the people around them began to laugh. One of the women was surprised to note that she did not expect this. Someone assumed that they were just joking, and others doubted their abilities. One of the men said that such losers were unlikely to be capable of anything, and someone even called them brats. Yukito, watching this, was perplexed by what he could have said wrong and why everyone was laughing. After being teased at the guild, one of the adventurers commented that Charlotte looked like she was looking for someone for the evening. He added that it was the first time he had seen anyone come here dressed like that, and remarked that it wouldn't be such a bad thing to loosen up a bit. Hearing this, Charlotte became indignant and snapped back that it was rude. When one of the adventurers started to taunt her again, Charlotte couldn't take it anymore, and screamed and attacked him with her sword. The man asked in surprise if Charlotte couldn't use her weapon. The man she was attacking asked with a smirk if she was threatening him, drawing his sword. One of the adventurers began to mock Charlotte, saying that he wondered why she had drawn her sword in the first place. He claimed that at least she had the courage. When the girl angrily demanded to be let go, he merely picked her up with a smirk and said that he was just about to have a drink with a lady and invited her to join him. When Yukito tried to stand up for Charlotte and ask her to let her go, the drunk dwarf grabbed him and threw him away. While Charlotte was screaming his name, another woman approached Yukito, patted his head, and asked if he was okay. The woman noted that the dwarf always behaved disgustingly when drunk. The woman who called Yukito cute suggested privacy and began to press herself against him, causing him confusion and anxiety. She declared that she would serve him properly, but the system identified her as a courtesan with a high level of sexual skills. Unable to withstand such pressure, Yukito broke away. The people around him began to laugh loudly at Yukito and his companion, mocking their intention to become adventurers. Someone sarcastically asked if they were sure of their decision, while another contemptuously called them pathetic and demanded that they leave. Despite the ridicule and humiliation, Yukito internally declared that he could not just leave. He did not come here to be laughed at. He wanted to become an adventurer to find Sana. Yukito desperately shouted out to the audience, asking if there was anyone who wanted to join their group. He hoped to find allies despite the humiliation. In response, he was only mocked by the remark that no one would risk their lives for someone like him. However, Yukito, clenching his fists, said with pain in his voice that he was not asking for himself. He was looking for his little sister. When the laughter in the hall had not yet died down, the dwarf suddenly pulled out his sword and pointed it straight at Yukito. It all happened in an instant. The threat hung in the air. Yukito froze, dumbfounded, and the girl, noticing what was happening, rushed forward with a scream, calling out his name in panic. Yukito realized that he had overestimated his powers, hoping that everything would go according to his plan. The dwarf rudely told him to get out, saying that people like him only get in the way. Charlotte reminded him that Yukito had magic, but he hesitated, not knowing what to do next, because Charlotte was still in danger. Yukito, despite his hesitation, decided to use magic to protect Charlotte. He cast the spell Mage's Hand, which created a force field, and pushed the mug out of the dwarf's hands. The dwarf was stunned when a mug of beer suddenly hit him in the face. He shouted in anger, asking who dared touch his drink. Meanwhile, Yukito and Charlotte hurriedly left the room. Yukito admitted that he was in a difficult situation, and it was only thanks to the Book of Peace that he was able to get out of it. He accidentally came across a page that contained information about the dwarf, and realized that his weakness was his addiction to drinking. It was this information that allowed him to find a way to distract and incapacitate the enemy. Yukito noted that he did not expect how important this book would be, because it was what helped protect Charlotte and get out of a difficult situation. Charlotte was deeply hurt by the humiliation and promised herself that she would become stronger by doing Yukito's bidding. She wanted to avenge the insult and prove her strength. At that moment, a stranger named Lang approached them, introducing himself as a cleric. He politely invited them to join him if they wished. The hero asked Lang why he had decided to join them. The cleric, smiling easily, admitted that he simply didn't have enough people, and added that their trinity of knight, mage, and cleric would be the perfect balance. Charlotte happily picked up on the idea, assuring them that they would definitely have no problems with that. Yukito was glad that Lang, a third-level cleric who had dedicated himself to the god of justice, Osmar, had joined them. He was relieved to learn that Lang had a kind and honest personality, unlike the rough adventurers they had met before. Yukito thought that he would now be able to gain experience more safely and confidently than before. He thanked Lang, hoping that they would get along well. The boy thought with relief that there were truly good people in this world after all, and looked at Lang with a sincere smile. Lang only smiled softly in response, confirming with his actions that he was trustworthy. Yukito thought with relief that there were truly good people in this world after all, and looked at Lang with a sincere smile. Lang only smiled softly in response, confirming with his actions that he was trustworthy. Yukito noted that the cave was humid, but the temperature was almost the same as outside. Lang, walking next to him, advised him to be careful and watch his step, to which Yukito nodded in agreement. After meeting Lang, Yukito was able to officially register as an adventurer. With Lang's support and the revelation that Charlotte was the Duke's daughter, the guild's attitude towards them changed dramatically. After purchasing the necessary equipment, the team headed to an unregistered dungeon, where they did not encounter any of the people who had previously laughed at them. The boy thought that in order to find Sana, he would have to go through the entire adventurer's path. He received a copper plate, like every newbie, and realized that the number of achievements he collected would determine not only his rank, but also his access to more accurate information. When he heard a squeak, he looked in the Book of the World and learned that they were in the natural habitat of bats. He notices the kobolds approaching with alarm and consults a book to find out what kind of monster they are. He learns that kobolds are small reptiles, weak but dangerous in groups, and that they worship evil dragons. Lang assumes that their increase in numbers is related to recent events. Yukito is a little nervous, since he only has 1 HP, and his main spell is Sleep. Lang assures him with a smile that everything is reliable. As they move through the dungeon, the party discusses potential traps. Lang explains that they have no training to detect them, but kobolds are not very smart, so by being careful, they can avoid problems. Yukito recalls how he almost died from goblins, and admits that he is still vulnerable. Charlotte suddenly becomes alert when she hears a sound in the darkness. The group freezes, and Lang urges them to be careful. A group of kobolds suddenly burst out of the shadows, attacking the heroes. Charlotte yells at Yukito to cast a spell immediately. Yukito and Lang stay behind, preparing for a magical counterattack. He activates the sleep spell by chanting a magic formula. Light emanates from his palms, and a wave of energy covers the kobolds. Several enemies instantly fall into a deep sleep and fall to the ground unconscious. Yukito breathes a sigh of relief at the result. The battle slows down for a moment. The kobolds suddenly rushed at Yukito. At this time, Lang, without hesitation, declared that he was passing judgment on Osmar's behalf and incapacitated the enemy with a powerful blow. Charlotte became concerned and asked if he was okay. Lang admitted that the situation was dangerous, but suggested that they finish off the remaining enemies as quickly as possible. Yukito clenched his fist, thinking that he needed to get stronger. Yukito said that in order to gain experience, he must defeat the enemy with his own hands, and asked for permission to finish him off. Lang did not object. Yukito noted that only he knew the laws of this world, since he possessed the Book of Peace. The hero apologized, saying that the monster would become his food, and then finished him off. Yukito's clothes were stained with blood, but he did not react to it and only said that it was time to go. After that, the destruction of the kobolds was going well thanks to Lang's offensive actions and Charlotte's defense. Yukito noted that he only had 5 experience points left until the next level, and had almost gained enough to advance. The characters noticed many goblin bodies and assumed that they had been attacked by other travelers. Charlotte prayed for the souls of the dead, and the others decided that now was a good time to continue on, although one of the heroes noted that they should turn back. Suddenly, Lang attacked Charlotte, dealing her a powerful blow. Yukito was shocked by what was happening and shouted her name. The hero asked Lang in amazement what he was doing. Yukito was shocked to realize that the seemingly good-natured cleric was a traitor. He couldn't believe that a man serving the god of justice could do such a thing. However, Lang coldly stated that the desperate newbies who overestimated their strength and died in the kobold lair. This is a common thing, and he will not tolerate anyone who believes in an evil god desecrating the name of his deity. Lang, filled with rage, he stated that he had long sensed the dark aura of the evil goddess Nephilia in Yukito. He confessed that ever since he saw him in the bar, he had been waiting for a convenient opportunity to send him to Noraku, the hellish world. Yukito was shocked. He could not believe that he had been mistakenly considered a follower of this woman. Yukito finally understood what Lang's kindness meant. Lang considered it his sacred duty to kill anyone he suspected of serving the evil god. He explained with cold conviction that Osmar had tasked him with eliminating the evil deity's influence in this world, and Yukito was just a part of that mission. Lang, after confirming that Charlotte had survived the blow thanks to the Duke's armor, he stated that her fault was that she supported the follower of an evil god. Yukito exclaimed that she had done nothing wrong, reminding him that in his world, assault and theft were considered evil. However, Lang ignored this, saying that his sword was perfect for destroying people like them and would help him do even more good deeds. The hero felt uneasy, noticing Lang's strange, empty gaze. It seemed like a bad sign. Lang began to furiously justify his actions, claiming that destroying, quote, infidels, taking their weapons, and using them for good was the teaching of Osmar. He was outraged that his actions were called evil and declared that he would not allow people like Yukito to desecrate this world and its god. Lang rushed forward with a manic grin, declaring that he would not allow him to even blink. He realized in horror that his opponent had completely lost control and was intent on killing. The boy tried to explain that he was not a follower of the Nephilim goddess, but was only using a book written by her. However, Lang, not listening to the arguments, considered the argument pointless and attacked. Meanwhile, Yukito flipped through the book in a panic, hoping to find a way to counterattack. When Lang, overcome with fanaticism, shouted that he must die, he, without wasting a second, cast a spell. Just before Lang attacked, Yukito released Magic Bolt with all his determination. The scene ended in a tense moment, when the outcome of the clash was still unknown. After the Magic Bolt violently collided with the enemy, Yukito staggered back, realizing that the attack had been successful. He tried to confirm whether everything had gone according to plan, but at that moment, the ground beneath his feet began to shake. The young man realized that one spell was not enough, and mentally noted that he had another trump card. Lang, having dodged the magic bolt, contemptuously called him a worthless brat, and doubted whether he was a real wizard. He slowly approached, threateningly stating that this was the end. Yukito shouted at Charlotte to act immediately. At that moment, Lang, who had not expected the attack, turned around in surprise, and Yukito rushed forward with his dagger, taking advantage of the element of surprise. He noticed a gap in his opponent's armor and decided to take advantage of this opportunity. He rushed forward with his dagger, hoping to strike precisely at the vulnerable spot. The enemy did not expect such speed, and this gave him a decisive advantage. The guy finally delivered a precise blow, breaking through the enemy's armor. The latter, shocked by such a clever and unexpected maneuver, could not believe that a magician could move like that. He was choking and coughing, and Yukito, clutching the dagger, realized with surprise that he himself did not understand whether he was a magician or a thief. He noted that by killing the bat with a magic bolt, he had gained the missing experience points and leveled up. He had not aimed at Lang, but precisely behind him, knowing that the bat would bring 15 points. This gave him the necessary boost before the fight. He reasoned that in this situation, the ideal solution was to prove himself as a multi-class mage and thief at the same time. The young man used two thief skills, observation and sneak attack. The first allowed him to find a weakness in the enemy's armor, and the second dealt critical damage. Lang, realizing his defeat, admitted his mistake, but still called him a follower of an evil god in the end, not backing down from his fanaticism. Lang, wounded and exhausted, admitted that he no longer had the strength to fight. He suggested to Yukito that they consider the fight a draw, noting that he too had exhausted his magic. He then tried to convince Yukito to temporarily put aside the differences between their gods and unite to save Charlotte. Yukito considered his enemy's words. Lang thought that he was a monk and could heal himself with quick recovery and kill them. At that moment, Yukito showed the amulet with the seal and asked with a cold smile if this was what Lang was looking for. The boy said that he couldn't cast the faith spell without the amulet, implying that he had deprived him of an important item. Lang realized with rage that the brat had indeed stolen the artifact from him and screamed that he would kill him. He said he was not kind enough to spare Lang and cast a spell, saying, "Clear water, blue tide." The young man used the spell Create Water to command the water to quench the thirst for healing the soul and cleanse the hatred. Charlotte thanked Yukito for saving her by giving her a healing potion to drink. He said he was glad she was safe and mentioned that he sent that guy to guard her, so everything should be fine. The hero admitted that he was too naive and unprepared for what had happened. He said that he sold Lang's equipment to get money for the future, and added that if he had been late with gaining experience then, they would have died. He realized that he had thoughtlessly accepted everything that was written in the Book of Peace, abandoning rational thinking. Yukito realized that he couldn't survive in this world by being a coward, and decided that he had to become stronger in order to save Sana. When the moon rose, those gathered in the temple took it as a sign that, according to the oracle, it was at this moment that the goddess of fate was to appear, and, as predicted, she did. The creature gave the order to find and capture the one who took possession of the Book of Peace. Yukito sat on his bed, looking at his profile page. He thought about how he had leveled up and gotten a new multi-class, a rogue wizard, which was a mix of a mage and a thief. He thought about the abilities he had gained. He had accidentally mastered the skills of a thief, and now had a multi-class that was a mixture of a mage and a thief. He knew that a rogue had many useful skills such as detection, eavesdropping, disguise, and search. The skill information gathering, in his opinion, could help him find Sana. He thought it would be better if he studied these skills in more detail, because only then could he find out Sana's location. Yukito wondered why he still only had 1 HP left, despite the Book of the World stating that health should increase by 1 every time he levels up. He began to wonder if this was a mistake, and how his reincarnation had even happened. In the end, he came to the conclusion that it was probably that goddess's fault. He noticed a note in the book about a faith bonus called Nephilia's Grace, and worried that she knew the evil god, but he couldn't figure out what exactly this grace meant. He also came across a mention of Nephilia's curse, and mentally fumed, trying to figure out what the hell he was seeing. Yukito read the description of the religious bonus associated with Nephilia with horror. He realized that under her curse, it was impossible to increase health without recovery, and changing religion was completely out of the question. He was shocked that even recovery from injuries was unavailable, and he wondered in shock what kind of goddess this was that her followers were destined for such a fate. Yukito thought with irritation, what kind of bonus was this that was worse than any curse? He wondered how he could possibly survive with only 1 HP, especially in a world where not only monsters, but also people like Lang were dangerous. His anxiety grew, and at that moment he realized that he had accidentally woken up the girl. Smiling, he apologized to her, and she noted in surprise that he had woken up too early. Waking up, the girl greeted Yukito and yawned, asking if he had slept well. Stretching, she noticed that the weather was great today. He reacted sharply with surprise and embarrassment upon seeing her. The girl cheerfully declared that after breakfast they would go to the guild, and suggested that they try hard today. Yukito, jumping up abruptly and covering his head, tried to understand why they were in the same room. He was confused by her spontaneity, and wondered how a woman could be so defenseless. When the hero and his companion entered the guild, the receptionist greeted them and noted that they now truly had the faces of adventurers. She pointed to the notice board and explained that all available tasks were posted there, and they could choose any task they liked. The girl drew Yukito's attention to the quest board, pointing excitedly at the quest to kill a black dragon, which had a reward of 6,000 gold. She enthusiastically added that she had a dragon sword, so it would be fine. Yukito, on the other hand, was stunned, reminding her that she couldn't even wield the sword. He noted that the quest was impossible to complete, and pointed out the more modest but doable quests, such as hunting mice or exploring the sewers, adding that there really was a wide range of options. Yukito was thinking about how he needed to raise his adventurer rank as soon as possible to find information about San. However, he knew that it was dangerous since he only had 1 HP. The girl suggested that it might be wiser to take on many easy quests, even if it took longer. At that moment, an old man burst into the guild, desperately begging for help. He offered 30 gold for completing the quest, explaining that it was all the villagers could muster. When the old man was driven away again, the girl could not stand it any longer and intervened, shouting at them to stop and declaring that they were being too harsh. One of the people present explained that adventurers had the right to choose their tasks, and without sufficient payment, it was impossible to hire anyone. However, she was not going to put up with this. She angrily declared that as a holy knight, she would not allow such cruelty to a man who clearly needed help. The young man noticed that 30 gold was a small reward compared to the other quests on the board, and thought that the adventurers were right not to take on this task. Although the old man admitted that exterminating mice and exploring the sewers were much more profitable, he still desperately begged for help. The hero noted to himself that Charlotte was good and perhaps sweet. He hesitated. He needed to find his sister Sana. The old man explained in a panic that his village, Ida, had been attacked by a pack of black wolves, and if things continued like this, it would be destroyed. Hearing this, Yukito remembered that the name seemed familiar. Looking at the map, he realized that Ida village was the exact location where the marker pointing to Sana was. Yukito noted to himself that there were some parameters of the village chief that he could not verify, as was the case with Lang. However, the old man seemed sincere and clearly wanted to save the village. He thought that the mark on the map could probably be related to the clue about San, although he did not rule out that it could be something else. Despite his doubts, he still decided that they would take on this task. Yukito announced that he would take on the mission, explaining that, although it might be dangerous, the mission contained a valuable clue that could lead to Sana. The village chief was delighted and thanked him. He then politely asked to meet at the castle gate if they could leave before tomorrow. Charlotte thought with a warm smile that she had always known Yukito to be a good person. Hearing this, he thought for a moment, repeating her words to himself with irony, as if he did not fully believe them. Left alone, he continued reading and came across a description of black wolves, neutral beasts with high movement speed and aggressive tactics. He paid special attention to their ability to strengthen each other when they attack in a pack. Yukito realized that they were going to fight a strong enemy and they wouldn't be able to attack first, so they needed to prepare well. He decided to give up on spells and buy a bow, since he could use it thanks to his thief class. He also needed equipment and potions for Charlotte, but the prices were too high and he only had 40 coins, so the situation seemed hopeless. He realized that he didn't even have enough money for a healing potion. With 1 HP and an empty wallet, he felt completely defeated. He frantically flipped through the book, looking for a way to make money quickly, and suddenly came across something that caught his attention. Charlotte screamed in despair when she saw Yukito pawning the family horse Rocinante. He tried to calm her down, explaining that he was not selling it, but only giving it away temporarily, promising to return it later. Yukito explained to Charlotte that the horse deposit was necessary to buy equipment. He assured her that he would take it back after completing several tasks. However, when he heard that Charlotte only had 13 gold, he was surprised, because he thought that the Duke's daughter should have more money. Charlotte explained that she had left home of her own free will and could not use the Duke's wealth. She had shared the money with those in need along the way and was now traveling with what she had left. So they had saved on the room and would not be able to take the horse with them. The hero explains that they won't be able to take Rocinante this time, because it will be difficult for her to cope with the wolves, who outnumber and outpace them. Instead, he trusts Charlotte to fight on the front lines and has come up with a way to win without taking damage. He asks permission to pawn the horse, reminding her that the main goal is to buy it back. Charlotte begged Yukito not to pawn Rocinante, as it was the family horse. However, Yukito insisted, saying that it was for the sake of saving the village. At that moment, Rocinante herself suddenly spoke in a male voice. She assured Charlotte that she would be fine and asked her to trust Yukito. Yukito explained that he had used a spell to talk to animals so that Rocinante could speak to them. The horse was momentarily captivated and admitted that she almost wanted to join the fight. Charlotte was touched but did not hide her surprise. According to her, Rocinante's speech sounded a little strange, especially considering that she seems to be mare. However, hearing how seriously the horse took it and how it affected Charlotte made him feel guilty. He explained that he wanted to be a worthy adventurer, but due to lack of money, he used a persuasion spell to influence the situation. Charlotte, touched by their concern, became upset, feeling unworthy of being a paladin, as she did not recognize their sincere feelings. Charlotte bids Rocinante farewell with tears in her eyes, promising that they will not be separated for long. She asks him to wait, because she and Yukito are going to carry out several tasks and ransom him as soon as possible. Yukito admits that he lied to both Charlotte and Rocinante to achieve the desired result. He used the spell Ghost Sound to simulate the speech of a horse. Afterwards, they continue their way through the city, stopping at a shop selling potions and equipment. Yukito uses a level 1 levitation spell to rise into the air and survey the area. He notices something important, though he doesn't immediately say what it is. The magic's description specifies that it can suspend a target up to 100 feet in the air and move them 10 feet per turn. The spell lasts for 10 minutes per caster level. If the target is still in the air when the spell ends, they fall. The hero and Charlotte study the village map. He assumes that the first attack will come from the cliffside, and the second from the area with the damaged fence. However, his attention is drawn to the barn. Despite the fact that there are other vulnerable places nearby, it is near the barn that the guards are concentrated. This seems suspicious to him. He assumes that the barn may be hiding something. The boy begins to suspect that the villagers are hiding something. He notices that the barn is guarded too carefully and believes that this is where the reason for the black wolf attacks lies. This strengthens his resolve. He is determined to find Sana at any cost, even if it means revealing the secrets of the village. All this black wolves, a strange symbol in the Book of the World, and the behavior of the villagers may be connected. Yukito is determined to survive at any cost for his goal. Meanwhile, the village is tensely silent. No wolves can be heard howling, which seems suspicious. The villagers, despite the presence of adventurers, are wary, feeling that something disturbing is coming. A mysterious woman in a fur robe emerges from the forest. She is accompanied by a pack of black wolves, whose eyes gleam in the darkness. She watches the village with a cold, determined gaze. An ominous howl could be heard over the village. A pack of black wolves was approaching. As Yukito had expected, Charlotte admitted that he was right. He, in turn, noted that the wolves had come after all. The villagers began to prepare for defense. Some clutched their weapons, some hid their anxiety behind reserved expressions. The air was filled with the tension of the battle. Yukito asked everyone to stick to the plan, but it was clear that even he was growing tired of Charlotte's constant bluntness. She expressed surprise at how much he knew, especially for a mage, and then became embarrassed when she noticed that his weapon did not look like a paladin's at all. Yukito explained that it was a revered weapon from legend called La Cadena. Suddenly, one of the villagers shouted that the enemy was advancing, and everyone immediately turned to look at the approaching threat. He commanded Charlotte to begin, and she responded confidently. A pack of black wolves was indeed bearing down on the village, as he had suspected. The villagers watched in panic as the heroes prepared for battle. The wolves were medium in size, but fast and dangerous, each a threat with a +4 bite and 2d6 +2 hit points. Yukito and Charlotte used magic spells to enhance their fighting abilities in preparation for battle. Yukito used bear strength, resistance, and magic defense, enhancing his strength, damage resistance, and defense. Charlotte, on the other hand, used Sacred Weapon and Divine Blessing, enhancing her weapons and filling them with divine energy. Both were serious and determined as they prepared to face the enemy. Charlotte charged into battle with fury, screaming a battle cry. The wolves rushed at her, but the girl, using her new weapon, the legendary chain, she deflected the attack with a powerful swing. The chain flew around the circle with force, throwing the opponents back. Thanks to the divine enhancements and the suddenness of the blow, She managed to knock down several wolves at once. Yukito watched the scene with cold calculation, noting that everything was going according to plan. One of the villagers exclaimed that Charlotte had knocked down all the wolves with one blow. At that moment, he gave the command, and the archers instantly fired arrows, raining down a barrage of projectiles on the fallen enemies, finishing off those who could still rise. He counted on Charlotte, who, with sufficient physical training and enhanced by magic, could cope with the control of the spiked chain. This weapon, using centrifugal force, it not only hit the enemies but also threw them back, allowing them to hold the defense at the entrance. If they manage to hold the wolves in this area, the fighters will retain the initiative. He calmly explained that everything was under control. Despite the need to avoid the wolves' attacks, even their bite would not cause Charlotte any serious harm. He knew, thanks to the combination of magical armor and spells, her defenses had reached an extremely high level. Since Charlotte was effectively knocking down the wolves, Yukito noted that the villagers could now focus on archery without any worries. The young man watched the battle and realized that his strategy with Charlotte had indeed worked. The narrow entrance, her immobile defense, and the support of the archers created a winning combination. He noted that the wolves seemed to be scared and were now going to retreat and regroup. Yukito explained that black wolves use howls as a means of communication and coordination while hunting. He decided that with the spell Ghost Sound, he could recreate their signals to confuse the enemy and prevent the wolves from regrouping. The boy noted that the plan was working, and their strategy had worked perfectly. He saw the number of wolves begin to decrease and decided that it was time to move on to the next stage. At that moment, the village chief suddenly called out to him, pointing out something alarming. The hero heard the village chief's alarming cry and turned around to see a new threat rapidly bursting out of the forest, a huge wolf with a rider on its back jumping over the village fortifications. Yukito's eyes widened in shock. He realized that this was only a prologue to the real battle. Everyone turned to the loud roar. A sudden blow broke through the defense. The young man with the bow cursed through his teeth, trying to aim, but in panic he almost dropped the arrow. With each step, the wolf rider came closer, sowing panic and destruction. Yukito shouted for no one to give up their positions, but people ran away in panic, asking for help. He realized that he had underestimated the enemy. No one expected the wolf to jump over the high fence so easily. The defense was on the verge of failure, and the most surprising thing was that the wolf's commander was a man. When the boy noticed the mask on the wolf's face, he suddenly realized that this was no ordinary creature. The wolf, clad in armor and adorned with mysterious markings, was rushing straight at them, and he barely had time to react. Everything indicated that this wolf was not just a beast, but an intelligent and dangerous opponent. The man couldn't believe his eyes. The one he thought was dead had survived. He was overcome with both relief and anxiety. Yukito told the others to continue supporting Charlotte, and he, with a firm expression, headed to where it all began. Yukito was about to head to the barn when a mysterious figure with a wolf like a masked beast blocked his way. He shouted the spell. With him, he thought it was good that he had learned this reflection spell, otherwise the attack could have been fatal. He barely managed to activate the air shield, which took the blow and saved him at the last moment. Yukito couldn't believe that the villagers had been hiding something important from them all this time. He admitted to himself that he felt uneasy. Something sinister was clearly happening in the barn. The girl in the mask had said that her relatives were being kept inside. It seemed to him that the black wolves were obeying someone, and now he began to guess that this someone was a human. The elf furiously blamed the humans for the destruction of her home village, declaring that she would never forgive them for losing everything she held dear. She contemptuously called them pathetic denoin, and seethed with hatred. Yukito, shocked by her words, did not understand what she was talking about, but was surprised to notice the shape of her ears and realized that an elf stood before him. The elf took aim with a cold gaze, aiming the arrow straight at Yukito. She warned that if he dared to stand in her way, his life would end. Her voice was even, but there was a threat in it, backed by determination. Charlotte, who stood next to him, seemed stunned. Yukito froze, not believing what was happening, and his eyes reflected both shock and fear. When Yukito asked if her people were really being held in the barn, the elf bitterly confirmed it. adding that the humans had kidnapped her younger sister, Lumilia. Charlotte, seeing what was happening, rushed towards Yukito, but he quickly raised his hand, asking her to stop. At the same time, he hastily flipped through the pages of his book, hoping to find a solution to this critical situation. At this time, he learned that the elf belonged to the second-level ranger class, had a neutral good alignment, and possessed the ability of friendship with animals. Yukito thought about what was happening, and admitted to himself that he had felt something was wrong with this extermination mission from the beginning. He noted that it was good that they did not take Rocinante with them. If the horse had been charmed, the situation could have ended in disaster. At the same time, he noticed a mysterious symbol that appeared in the book and wondered about its meaning. Yukito thought about it. The symbol he saw in the book was the same as Sana's. He assumed that it could be a clue to her location. Perhaps this elf was somehow related to Sana. The girl admitted that she came to the village with one goal, to find her sister. Honestly, she would not have accepted this order at all if she had not seen a chance to find her. He thought about it. The symbol he saw in the book was the same as Sana's. He assumed that it could be a clue to her location. Perhaps this elf was somehow related to Sana. The girl admitted that she came to the village with one goal, to find her sister. To be honest, she would not have accepted this order at all if she had not seen a chance to find her. With these words, she looked anxiously at Yukito, who was silent, deep in thought. The hero tried to convey to the elf that he understood her pain. He knew what it was like to have your family torn away from you. He offered to help her search the barn, hoping for cooperation. But the elf was wary. Even if she was ready to trust him, she could not say the same about the villagers. With doubt in her voice, she asked what he was talking about. Yukito admitted that he was on the road for a reason. He was looking for his younger sister, who had once disappeared. He added that he could not leave someone who was in the same situation as him. His words, in which he compared his pain with the elf's experiences, turned out to be sincere. This touched her. She was silent for a while, and then, lowering her bow, calmly said that she understood. The elf, still wary, warned Yukito that if he had deceived them, she would not hesitate to take his life. He, however, confidently replied that she had nothing to worry about. After that, they introduced themselves to each other, the girl calling herself Charlotte, the guy Yukito. When asked who she was, the elf, after a pause, gave her name as Serena. Yukito tried to pick the lock, even though he had no skill to do so. He admitted that he had never tried it before, but he decided to try picking locks with thieves' tools. Despite his efforts, the attempt failed. Then Charlotte, unable to bear it any longer, confidently approached and said that she could handle it herself, asking Yukito to step aside. When the boy couldn't open the lock, Serena and Charlotte took up the matter decisively. Instead of trying to open it, she simply kicked the door down, leaving him in shock. Charlotte smiled and said that they could move on, and Yukito, slightly stunned, noted that he really had simply kicked that door down too. Serena couldn't take it anymore and rushed forward, shouting her sister Lumilia's name. Yukito barely managed to grab her hand, stopping her impulse, and warned her that there might be traps in the cave, and they should remain calm. He then called upon magic, asking for a pale light to dispel the veil of darkness so that they could see what was hidden ahead. After activating the light spell, Yukito and his companions found themselves in a brightly lit room. The magic illuminated the space around them, dispelling the darkness, and allowed them to examine their surroundings. Despite his wariness and expectation of traps, Yukito noticed that nothing suspicious had been found in the room yet, at least at first glance. The characters, having searched the room, noticed something strange among the barrels, a hidden hatch leading down. The girl pointed out the find to Yukito, noticing the descent, and everyone immediately became wary. Alarm flashed in their eyes. It became clear that this place was hiding much more than it seemed at first glance. The heroes, descending into the dungeon, finally found the captive elf with a hacked body, chained to the wall. She was weak and exhausted, but still alive. A scream, sounding from the darkness, echoed in the cell with despair and hope. At the same time, they found Lumilia. Serena, overcome with anger and despair, rushed towards her sister with a scream, blaming people for her suffering. She cut the ropes that bound Lumilia and picked her up in her arms. The elf's condition turned out to be extremely serious. She was on the verge of consciousness, exhausted and wounded. Charlotte, seeing this, panicked and declared that treatment was required immediately. In the tense silence, Yukito clenched his fist, suspecting that he had not been told everything. Yukito realized with horror that the villagers had intentionally sacrificed Lumilia, all for the sake of a ritual sacrifice to the Black Dragon. Yukito and Charlotte angrily demanded an explanation from the villagers, accusing them of sacrificing Lumilia under the pretext of protecting the village. The girl with the sword could barely contain her rage, calling the act shameful. The elder, in justification, claimed that they had no other choice. Serena barely contained her anger, clenched her fists, shouting at the village elder. She remembered her past, her native village, people, friends, toys, everything that was once dear to her, and everything that was now lost. There was a pain of betrayal in her voice. The elves that were trusted were sold to those who promised protection. While the adventurers were still processing what had happened, they were suddenly surrounded by a crowd of armed villagers. Yukito and his companions became wary, realizing that the people they were trying to understand and save now had spears pointed at them. One of the elders stepped forward with a grim expression and said that he was sorry. The village chief looked at the adventurers with cold determination and declared that after what they had seen, they could not be allowed to leave alive. At that moment, Yukito, without hesitation, cast a first-tier spell, Shimmer Dust. A bright cloud of golden particles filled the space, blinding all enemies. Blinded by the flash, they screamed, pressing their hands to their eyes and rushing around the room in fear. One by one, they lost coordination, not understanding what was happening. In the confusion, someone accidentally knocked over a torch, and the room immediately burst into flames. Screams of horror were heard. Someone called for help and demanded water, but the flames had already begun to spread throughout the warehouse. Yukito, without wasting time, ordered everyone to leave while the blinding spell was still in effect. He was sure that those who are capable of torturing a girl for their own interests deserve no mercy. Despite Charlotte's doubts, he insisted on running away, since the effect of the shimmer dust would only last a moment. As they quickly left the dungeon, the village chief, still blinded, screamed after them in despair, pressing his hand to his eye. Charlotte, worried, asked what they should do now. Yukito firmly stated that they should first find shelter and take care of Lumilia. He asked Serena if there was a safe place in the forest, and she, without hesitation, answered that she would show him the way. Grabbing the weakened Lumilia in his arms, Yukito promised to hold on for a little while longer. The heroes were rushing to take cover in the forest when a sudden rumble shook the ground. Serena stopped abruptly, peering into the distance warily. Yukito immediately noticed her confusion and shouted that someone was approaching. Without waiting for an explanation, he ordered everyone to speed up. A black shadow swept across the sky, causing everyone below to freeze. The heroes' hearts grew cold as they saw the dragon's wings spread out and the silhouette approaching rapidly. Someone exclaimed that he was here, and tension appeared on their faces. A threatening silhouette hung in the sky. The black dragon Garzamug finally appeared. His dark wings eclipsed the sky, and his eyes sparkled with dark fury. The heroes below froze. Yukito was surprised to recognize in this creature the very name that previously sounded only like a legend. Yukito panics, and in front of him is absolute evil, the black dragon Garzamug. He clearly understands the enemy is on a completely different level. For the dragon, they are just insignificant bugs that can be crushed with one move. Yukito wants to run, save himself and others, but his legs do not move. Fear paralyzes him, and the dragon's gaze pierces him to the very heart. Serena was horrified to realize that the black dragon had come to take Nephilia's sacrifice. The hero began to suspect that it served an evil goddess. Yukito was shocked, not immediately understanding what was happening, but he was overcome with anger. He began to wonder if this dragon was truly a servant of darkness. Serena shouted for Yukito and Charlotte to immediately take her sister and carry her away, and she stood in front of the dragon, declaring that her opponent would be Garzamug. Yukito, confused, tried to stop her, assuring her that she would not be able to cope, because this was not an ordinary person in front of her. But Serena did not back down. At this point, the dragon, grinning, asked if they really believed in the possibility of escaping from him, and mockingly called them pathetic fools. Garzamug, the black dragon, soared into the sky and unleashed a torrent of flames on the building. The heroes below watched in horror as the flames consumed the structure. Yukito and Serena were shocked by what had happened, realizing that this was only the beginning. As Garzamug unleashed another wave of flames on them, Yukito heard someone scream his name in panic before he was pushed aside, saving himself from the fiery impact as the building was finally submerged in the sea of flames. Charlotte asked in a panic if Yukito was okay, and he asked anxiously what was happening to Serena. A moment later, seeing her lose consciousness and fall, he called out her name in horror. Yukito called out to Serena in alarm, and he hurried to her aid. However, the girl tried to stop him, saying that it was too dangerous to approach now. At that moment, he felt a strange and disgusting smell, and wondered in surprise what it could be. The young man noticed that the ground was beginning to melt, and, confused, he wondered if it was acid. His disgust and anxiety grew as he realized that the dragon was approaching. In a desperate attempt, he struck before it was too late. He realized with dismay that with their low level, they wouldn't be able to even get close to the dragon. He knew that if they didn't run away right now, they wouldn't have a chance to survive. However, he was tormented by the thought of Serena, who was left behind. The dragon scorned the humans standing before him and asked why they dared to do such a thing. He noted that the elven victim was still alive and reached out to grab her. Yukito screamed in despair as he saw Serena being carried away by the beast's paw. Charlotte exclaimed to the dragon that she was the paladin Charlotte Arbrania and she would end his life. Yukito tried to stop her, saying it was useless. The dragon, hearing her challenge, muttered the word paladin as he assessed the threat. Charlotte charged with determination, but when she saw the movement, she clenched her teeth. At that moment, the black dragon released its breath, a stream of deadly caustic acid. According to the explanation, the black dragon's breath can corrode normal metal armor, but does not affect magical armor. Charlotte dashed, trying to dodge the deadly stream. While the dragon was distracted, Charlotte gathered all her strength and activated her class skill. Raising her sword to the sky, she chanted that she would use Evil Smite, putting all her charisma and paladin strength into the strike. It was an attack that could deal fatal damage to a creature with a dark nature, if it was truly evil. As Charlotte swung her sword at the enemy with a scream, she poured all of her anger, determination, and holy power of a paladin into the blow. The blow landed squarely on the dragon, but was immediately countered by a powerful blow. The girl didn't have time to dodge, but was thrown back by the shockwave. Her eyes widened in pain and surprise for a moment before she lost consciousness. Yukito screamed her name in horror, rushing towards her. Garzamug leaned over Yukito, a picture of terror and power. His blazing eyes bored into the boy mercilessly, as if measuring his last second of life. He froze, feeling cold sweat running down his back as he stood face to face with an absolute threat, and his heart sank in fear from that gaze. The hero looked into the mouth of the black dragon Garzamug and wondered if he would really die here. Fragments of memories of scenes from his past life and smiling Sana flashed before his eyes. He felt how everything inside him was squeezed with fear and regret, because he had not yet managed to do what he had to. Looking at the stopped dragon, the monster remembered the evil goddess who sent him to this world, and anxiously uttered the name of Nephilia. Yukito felt a scary, ominous aura coming from Nephilia. He thought that it might be a curse placed on her. Yukito thought that he only needed a little time to win. He told the dragon that he was sent by Nephilia and that he was preparing a sacrifice for her right now, fulfilling her will. He was surprised to note that he had not expected any of the black wolves to survive. He also realized that these beasts were trying to save Serena. At this point, the dragon mentally called the wolves vile creatures. Serena gathered her strength and asked Yukito and Charlotte to take care of her sister. At that moment, Yukito realized that this might be their only chance to escape. Yukito threw a smoke bomb to create a screen and buy time to escape, hoping that the thick smoke would hide them from the dragon's sight. The villagers said they were very sorry, but the sacrifice prepared for Garzamug had been stolen. At this time, the dragon himself wondered who could have accepted Nephilia's cursed blessing. Hearing that the victim had been stolen, the black dragon asked this out loud in shock, and then his gaze filled with rage and ferocity. The enraged dragon accused the villagers of breaking the terms of the treaty, threatening to pay in blood for their oversight. In panic, the people tried to justify themselves by claiming that they had begun searching, and one of the elders begged for a little time, but the dragon despaired that their leader was an idiot. As the hero made his way through the forest, he breathed heavily, cursing the unknown monster they had to face. He knew that only thanks to the intervention of the black wolves did they have a chance of salvation, and he admitted that he should be grateful to them. He decided to put off thinking about it for later. For now, they needed to focus on running, because the enemy could still be pursuing them. Serena's name flashed through his mind, and he noticed that the sky was starting to turn an alarming shade of red. He continued to carry her in his arms, not losing sight of the burning settlement in the distance. The fire reflected in his eyes, reminding him that everything was only just beginning. The boys were sitting in the forest near the fire, and Charlotte was tying a bow on Lumilia's dress. After they finished, the boy was allowed to watch. He asked if the Duchess was still in pain, to which she replied that it was still a little, but it would soon pass. Lumilia sat on the ground, covering herself with the dress she had. She asked Yukito and Charlotte who they were. The guys introduced themselves and then said that Serena asked to save her. The girl was shocked that they knew her sister, and so she jumped up. The guy handed her half a fruit and said that she can't make such sudden movements yet. The wizard asked the girl to tell him what had happened between the elves and the village. And then she began to tell him where their village was, that they had a source of water, lush greenery all around. It was a beautiful place to live. They didn't think then that they needed a friend nearby. Until the moment when they were attacked by the Black Dragon and his predecessors. The surviving elves went to ask for shelter from the dragon in the village of Ida, with whose inhabitants they had previously traded. They did not refuse help. But then these bearers of evil came to them and began to ask the head of the village where he was hiding all the surviving elves. The villagers were with the survivors and said that they were safe. But suddenly the village elder entered the hangar and ordered that all the elves be captured. The villagers began to object and ask why and for what reason, to which the elder replied that the Black Dragon demanded an elven sacrifice, and if he did not get what he wanted, then the most unpleasant thing would happen to the village. The elves started running to save themselves. But these villains in hoods were already on the street. They started catching and throwing the poor elves. And at that moment they separated Serena and Lumilia. They screamed and cried, but their hands still separated. Yukito began to think, because in the book the village elder was described as neutral kind, but here the guy did not see kindness. A kind person would not have done this. But later he decided that his kindness, apparently it was directed at the villagers. He wanted to protect the people of his village. Then the boy realized that the book does not describe the character of a person completely. What is written can only be useful for initial information. And then Lumilia asked about her sister. The guys looked at each other. From these glances, the girl realized that something had happened. Yukito told her that the village of Ida had been destroyed by a dragon and that it had taken Serena. But all the boy could do was run away. Lumilia's sister must still be alive, because the villains perform the sacrifice on the night of the Moon of Calamity when 3 moons come together. Such an event will happen in 18 days. And then the girl jumped up, saying that she must save her sister, but then she collapsed to the ground. Lumilia begged Yukito to go and save Serena, but he decided to remain silent for now. He thought about how he wanted to avoid another encounter with the dragon, since they couldn't defeat it, but there was one thing that bothered him. Serena and the wizard's younger sister had the same symbols, and saving his sister was what worried him most. Then he said that on his map, the girl's mark appeared on the Temple of Evil. The path there would give him a clue on how to find Sana. But first, they needed to level up and learn more about the temple. But what if this symbol meant that his sister was being held captive? Yukito immediately imagined the unknown person swinging a dagger at his sister, and immediately threw the book away. Lumilia stood up and said that she had to go because she didn't want to lose her sister. The guy understood her perfectly. The girls told the wizard that they needed to defeat Garzamug, but they needed a well-thought-out plan. Yukito, holding the book in his hands, was thinking about how to defeat the dragon with the Munchkin game. Lumilia was a level 1 ranger. Rangers are skilled with a bow and can communicate with living beings as well as use natural magic. And Charlotte should have leveled up after defeating the Black Wolves. She had over 2,000 experience points. But for some reason she was still level 1. Then the guy asked her about it, but the girl was surprised and asked again about this level. The guy explained that by leveling up she could improve her skills. She knew about something similar, about exaltation. But it was done in a church, praying all day. But would it be possible to improve a specific skill from exaltation? Yukito said that it was complete nonsense that the skills were acquired randomly. Then he decided to try to write the level number in the book himself, and then it began to emit some kind of light. The guy did not expect this. It worked. Now in the book, the girl has the second level, she began to feel new powers. But Yukito began to think that although Charlotte had enough level, to go to the next level you need to do something. In her case, it was prayer. But it turns out that if the guy writes levels directly into the world book, he will be able to choose skills for his squad. This changes things radically. Now he decided to check what a second level paladin can do, because now she has access to new skills. He called the girl. Then the guy said that he would return Rocinante, because he promised to do it. Charlotte was shocked and happy at the same time. A man was cleaning the stable, humming a tune under his breath. He noticed that the horse in the stall was sad, and the man handed her a carrot. Suddenly, where she was standing, the floor began to glow. The groom did not understand what it was and noticed it, and then this horse simply disappeared, and the floor beneath it stopped emitting light. The man was scared, because it was bad that the horse held hostage simply disappeared. A portal opened on the ground in front of the boys, from which a horse began to appear. It was Charlotte's horse, Rocinante. She didn't quite understand where she was, so she started looking around in surprise. As soon as Charlotte's faithful friend saw her, tears immediately began to flow from his eyes. The girl hugged her horse for a long time, saying how much she missed it, but the girl did not understand how she ended up there. To which the guy told her that she was here to fulfill the Duchess's wishes. But in fact, Yukito did this because he wanted to get her back. But he was more attracted by the bonus of a second-class paladin. Rocinante received the title of a sacred creature due to Charlotte leveling up and being able to do so. The horse's appearance changed, and they could now say that it was a different horse. Then the girl asked if it was right that they wouldn't pay. The guy told her that they would pay later, after defeating the dragon, relying on her naivete. Yukito said that their main task at this point was to find Serena. Then he turned to the horse and called it Rocinante, but apparently it didn't like that at all. Rocinante reared up and angrily went at the guy. But then Lumilia came up to the horse and began to calm it down. She succeeded, and this surprised the owner, because Rocinante usually does not listen to strangers. And Yukito at that moment was lying on the ground and trying to come to his senses from fear. And then the girl took a knife in her hands. Her friends were scared, because they didn't know what she wanted to do, but she only cut off her hair, saying that she would soon save her sister. Lumilia was determined. She said that this time she would definitely save her sister. The girls were in a public bath in the city of Orbeta. Lumilia turned away from everyone and said that she could wash herself, but Charlotte said that she couldn't because she needed to wash herself completely. The Duchess approached the elf and told her to sit still, and at the same time began to help her, soaping and rubbing her. Lumilia was very embarrassed. Afterwards, they went to take a hot bath with the others. Lumilia was still embarrassed, and Charlotte asked her if she was hot. The elf touched her hair and started to tell something. The girl recalled that when they lived in the village, Serena always cut her hair. That made her sad. But Charlotte decided to support her and said that it suited her as it was. And then she said that she felt something in the forest. She was worried that she felt her power had grown, but she had not performed the ascension ritual. And then she thought, maybe her goddess had given her this power to destroy evil. Suddenly, Lumilia lowered her head and said her sister's name, to which Charlotte hugged her and said that everything would be fine, they would save her. She gave her word as a paladin. When they arrived in the living room, Yukito was preparing for battle, but he didn't know where to look. When the girl asked him about it again, the guy explained that he had the same problem that he had before leaving for Ida Village. They have used up all their scrolls, potions, money in the village. Charlotte's armor also needs to be repaired. After all, to fight the dragon, they need good equipment and also magic items for everyone. They had little gold left. They could, of course, do small tasks in the guild for a small fee, but they did not have time for that. And then Lumilia timidly said that she could earn money with her body. She had heard that people had such work. Yukito immediately began to stop her and dissuade her. He said that although call girls earn more than ordinary workers, this is unacceptable and, moreover, it will not be enough. And since they are not financially literate enough, He will deal with all this. The boy explained that there were 3 types of coins used in cities: gold, silver, and copper. 1 gold coin was worth 10 silver coins, and 1 silver coin was worth 10 copper coins. In his world, 1 gold coin was worth 10,000 yen. But the Duchess didn't even know that there were other coins besides gold. Charlotte's healing potion would cost a lot, about 500,000 yen, in the guy's money. And the magic scrolls would cost about 250,000 yen. The acid protection potion needed to fight the dragon's breath costs 300 gold. He would also like an amulet of protection against the magic bolt, which can kill him if he is without some protection, and it costs 1,000 gold. But they not only need to earn money, but also gather information about this temple. They have 18 days in reserve, of which 3 days will be spent on finding information, 2 on preparation, and 2 on the road. They must also find time to increase their levels, but they could complete a task that was not far from the city they were in now, and they could complete it in the shortest time possible. And if they completed it, Yukito and Charlotte would become level 3, and Lumilia would become level 2. But money was their main problem. They needed to earn a huge amount of money soon. Yukito came up with something, but Charlotte quickly stopped him, asking if it would concern Rocinante? To which the guy answered no. And then Lumilia interrupted them. She didn't understand why they were going so far to help save her sister, because it was the elves' problem. Yukito said that the girl shouldn't worry about it. The guy explained that they had their reasons for this too. They needed Lumilia's strength, among others, to defeat the dragon. Charlotte approached the girl, smiled, and told her not to worry, because they would definitely save her sister. Yukito also approached the elf and sat down in front of her. He said that they would defeat the black dragon. But he thought about it because he was not trying to save Serena. He was using this girl's revenge to find a way to Sana, to his younger sister. That night, Lumilia and Charlotte slept together. And then Yukito headed to the stable where Rocinante was sleeping, and she dreamed of herself and Charlotte hugging each other. The guy leaned over the horse with a knife and immediately apologized. Afterwards, he disappeared into the alley between the houses and the crowd during all this chatter. He walked further down this alley until he came across a door. As soon as he started to open it, some troll stopped him. He asked the guy what he was doing here. He replied that he had come to see Volzak. After these words, they let him in. When he entered, he saw many people, who were mostly elves. As he walked towards the person he was looking for, everyone was looking at him and watching. As soon as he got there, he asked if it was Volzak in front of him, and then he told the guy that he was seeing him for the first time. How did he even find this place? He was the owner of the black market. Volzak asked what he brought. Then the guy took out a good quality unicorn horn from under his cloak. Then the man asked him where he got it, because killing a unicorn is a mortal sin. The guy said that he did not come here for the sake of chatter, so he was interested in the cost of his goods. And then Volzak said that the horn was perfect in every way, and he was ready to pay 500 gold pieces for it. The guy took the money and began to leave. His whole trip to this place scared the guy a lot, because there were adventurers from all over the world there, and they could kill him for any little thing. And in general, the unicorn horn could restore a lot of health to its owner once a day. But if you use a healing potion on the horn, it will be able to grow back, so you can take it an incredible number of times. But this will be too suspicious. And it can also incur the wrath of the goddess of mercy, and she will be able to impose a curse of silence for a long time. But at the same time, the guy has the blessing of the cursed goddess, so he is immune to curses. Still, he didn't want to make enemies with another goddess. Thanks to Rocinante, they had enough money to last for a while. He wanted to buy himself an 11-foot staff. The spiked chain is a weapon that has spikes attached to the end of the chain. This allows it to strike at a distance of up to 3 meters, and can also be used to knock down enemies. When using it, you can use the dexterity spell instead of strength. Lumilia opened the window and saw 2 small birds sitting on a branch outside. It was a beautiful day outside. The girl was sitting in her room, looking at her crossbow. A bird flew up to her and landed on her shoulder. After that, the little creature began to sing. Then they suddenly heard Charlotte scream, denying something. When Lumilia went out to look, she saw Yukito, who was persuading the girl to go somewhere, claiming that this was a normal transfer, and she could then return back to her previous life. The girl asked why she should change God if her entire family had believed in the god of Mercy Luria all their lives. to which the guy began to explain to her that they were going up against a strong enemy, and besides, he had minions. In order to defeat him, she should serve a stronger and more generous god. This would make their plan easier. As Yukito expected, the girl did not agree. But the bonuses from believing in her god are very small and not suitable. The worldview of her god is lawfulness, kindness. He grants mercy to fair people, and a quick death to the evil. His bonuses would be useless in battle. Yes, healing hands could help with minor wounds, but what's the point when you have 1 unit of health? And in the Book of the World, he can't change it, so Charlotte has to change her faith herself. Then Yukito started talking about her god, saying how great he is and so on. This caught the girl's attention. He continued that his bonuses would not help them in battle. The girl began talking about her sword from their home, but it was an ordinary longsword and she would not be able to use it at full power because she had a low level of strength. She flatly refused to accept another faith, and then the guy realized how stubborn she was. He decided to play on her pity and began to beg her, convincing her that nothing terrible would happen because it was only temporary. All this was necessary to help those in need. The girl continued to stand her ground. She did not want to change her faith, and asked Lumilia if she had the same opinion. Not hearing anything, she simply covered her ears with her hands and did not want to listen to anyone. And then Lumilia became active and said that she could change gods if necessary. Charlotte didn't expect that. And then Yukito looked at his book and said that she could stay with her forest god, Eunice. But he would recommend the goddess of thieves. She gives many bonuses and advantages, also increases the level of mastery of the bow. Yukito thought that if it were not for the ban of the cursed goddess, then he would have changed his belief in the goddess of thieves. The girl listened to the guy and said that in that case she would change her faith to hers. The guy started asking if she was sure, and Charlotte said that she needed to think about it seriously before doing something like that. But Lumilia replied that she didn't need to think about it, she had decided. The girl continued that the god of the forests did not save the elves, and now she needs the strength to do it herself. She is ready to do it. After that, Charlotte also thought about it. The girl also agreed. She said that her god would forgive her, because it was only for a while and for justice. Then Yukito thought that he had not even expected that Lumilia would want to change her faith, and this had already made Charlotte change her mind. The guy said that it was only until they defeated Garzamug, and then Charlotte asked which god she should worship. Then they started looking at the Book of Peace together, and the guy offered her an option. It was the goddess Malefice, the goddess of evil. She ruled all evil in the world. She enjoyed violence, deception, tyranny, and much more. But her bonuses were great for combat. But Charlotte refused without even thinking. For her, it was terrible. The girl said that anyone, but not evil gods, because she was a holy paladin. To which Yukito began to tell her that the bonuses of this goddess are very strong. The use of the evil aura is unlimited. She will be able to summon servants and get new weapons. And she will also become much stronger. Having received the status of a fallen paladin, her horse Rocinante will also become stronger, because she will receive the title of undead. She will have immunity to poisons, and many other things that can play into her hands. Charlotte was terrified. The girl stood up and shouted that this would never happen in her life, and slammed Yukito's book shut. She sat on the bed and began to hug Lumilia. Then the guy suggested another god. He suggested the god of strength and fury, Florgus. He is the god of all warriors. He has a hammer that he wields and can smash any evil into pieces. Yukito began to explain that with his bonuses, she will be able to use a sword, and he also has another weapon, a spiked chain. The guy asked if she agreed, because thanks to his bonus to strength, she would be able to use her sword. The girl thought a little more, looked at Lumilia and agreed, but reminded her that she only agreed to this if it was temporary. He used the skill of the door in the face, which is a kind of manipulation that will help achieve what he wants. This technique, although intended for deception, gives pluses to the guy's persuasion skill. When Charlotte asked the guy what god he worshipped, he lied, saying that he worshipped the goddess of virtue. Then he noticed that his personality became neutral evil. They arrived at the Adventurers Guild and walked up to the quest board. They looked and noticed the Goblin King quest. Goblins have settled in an abandoned fortress near Orbd. They kidnap young girls and perform some dark rites and rituals with them. 2 groups of adventurers went to this place, but no one returned. And then the guys went there. Yukito, along with Charlotte, Rocinante and Lumilia, stood on a plain, with large expanses and mountains opening up before them. They arrived at the village of Arda, which had a large number of guards, since the castle with the goblins was located very close to this village. What was happening with these goblins, these rituals, reminded Lumilia very much of the situation in the village of Ida, and she assumed that perhaps the Black Dragon could be involved here too. At that moment, the boy looked at his map and thought about how the symbol of Serena and his sister appeared when he received a quest. It is possible that Sana is also in this castle of darkness. And then Charlotte jumped up from her seat and exclaimed that, in the name of the holy god Luria, she will not allow all these rituals to happen. But then she remembered that she is now the paladin of the god Florges. Yukito remembered that when he first came to this world, he had already met goblins. While the boy was thinking about the goblins, that they were smart compared to other monsters, also strong in a group, and decided that now he would attack, his thoughts were interrupted by Charlotte, asking about their plan. Lumilia suggested using fire, but the guy told her that it wasn't an option, because they wouldn't be able to burn down an entire stone castle. Yes, they would all come out of it, but that would only make the situation worse, because they would have to fight everyone at once. Then she suggested the water option, but it wouldn't be very practical either. There are no large rivers around this castle, and their magic wouldn't be enough to flood the fortress. However, if they sent all the goblins into the water, then they would be able to defeat dozens of these creatures. But that could also make them all wary. First, they would have to find out everything, find out the situation inside. Then Charlotte asked, are they going to sneak inside? But Yukito had another plan. 2 goblins were patrolling near the entrance to the fortress, when suddenly a bag with something inside fell in front of them. They approached it with interest, and wanted to know what was there and what it was. When they opened the bag and looked inside, they saw that it was filled to the brim with gold. The goblins immediately decided that they had to take it. Yukito was watching all this. Already in the squad house, Yukito was drawing something. The girls approached him and asked what he was doing. He replied that he was doing mapping, and just then he finished and put the ruler down. The guy closed his eyes and started to mumble something. The girls stood and looked at all this with surprise. From the girls' side, it was not clear, but Yukito at that moment was watching that gold and what they were doing with it. He used a spell to find the item, which was the contents of the bag. Through it, he was able to calculate and redraw on the map where the goblin's warehouse was. The guy redrew the map of the dungeon by imagining all the images in his head. For example, the goblins brought bread to the warehouse, weapons to the armory, and gold to the vault. This way he learned the layout inside. You could say it was a map of the paths the goblins took most often, where there were no traps. And thanks to Rocinante's horn, he now knows where their leader is. So now they know where the Goblin King is, and it turns out that their enemy is completely open to them. The goblins in their dungeon were chopping something with their clubs, but then a small skull rolled to the side, and one of them went after it to bring it back. Those who remained in place heard something in the direction where one of them went. At that moment, the goblin who went for the skull had his head cut off. When the others approached him and saw their brother without a head, they became frightened. In front of them stood a knight in armor and with a sword, who stretched out his hand towards them. The knight's armor was all covered in blood, and when the goblins looked at him, their skin trembled and they broke out in a cold sweat from fear and surprise. One of the goblins decided to attack with his club, but the knight easily parried his blow. Then the second goblin, not understanding anything, asked, "Who is it?" And then the knight plunged his sword into the goblin's heart, after which the second one began to scream. He was heard by the third one, who was in the same place. Unaware of what was happening, when he turned around he saw nothing. But someone took advantage of this, and then a hand appeared above the goblin and struck with a blade. The hand returned to Yukito, and gave him the blade. It was the spell of the magician's hand, which the caster can control and drag small objects. After that, the guy looked at his map, and they went on. Inside this armor was a zombie, which Yukito created with the spell of creating undead, which became available to him after his character acquired an evil trait. While the zombie distracts everyone from the front, the guys enter through the back door, which the guy found using mapping. The zombie, of course, is not so strong, but thanks to Charlotte's armor, he will be able to stand for a while. Of course, Charlotte hadn't wanted to dress a zombie in her armor before, but she still agreed with the help of her persuasion skill. They continued down the dungeon and saw a corridor that wasn't on his map. It turns out that goblins rarely go this way. The guy took out a storage bag, a bag that can hold up to 230 kilograms, but it still weighs 7 kilograms. Then he took out an 11-foot pole, with which he was able to check the path for traps. When he pressed this pole on one of the slabs, many spears came out that could pierce them through. After that, he pointed his finger to the side and said that they should go there. They approached a wall and started looking for a button that would open a secret door. They couldn't find it. So Yukito took out a few bottles of intelligence potion from his bag, which was supposed to help him. Then he decided to drink almost everything he had, the girls exclaimed. What is he doing? But he continued, throwing empty bottles on the floor. Various thoughts immediately started running through his head, and he said that now he understood and knew everything. Charlotte and Lumilia began to support him, because the guy began to stagger from side to side. And then Yukito started feeling around the whole wall in search of the right brick. Charlotte was worried and called out to the guy. He turned to her with a blank expression, after which his eyes filled with blood. He pointed his finger at the wall in front of him and shouted in a commanding tone for them to look for the hidden door. Lumilia immediately began to do so, while Charlotte still stood there in a little shock. As it turned out, it was one of the skills, Detect Hidden Doors. It allows you to find and open doors in the nearest 3 meters from the caster. The guy realized that the potion of intelligence, it turns out, is a powerful thing, and they went on. As they walked further, they saw a large number of human skeletons. It looked terrible. But then a goblin ran out from around the corner saying that people needed to be killed. Without thinking twice, Lumilia pointed her bow at the evil spirit and fired an arrow straight into his head, which was, of course, unexpected. And then a whole horde of them ran out, and they all shouted that the squad were enemies and they needed to be killed. Then the guys immediately started running away, but Yukito for some reason called out to Charlotte. The girl pulled out her sword right as they were trying to escape. She may have lost access to her basic skills due to her belief in the new god, but that won't hurt at all. Now she can use her longsword. And also thanks to the light armor, she can use her agility, because in her old armor, all her agility just disappeared. Also, Yukito thought it would be nice to take Rosinante, but she went mad for a while due to her change of faith. But Lumilia, thanks to the blessing of the new goddess, gives her a plus 6% to critical hit when using a bow. And since she is a ranger, this is great for her. The guy, of course, felt sorry for the girl's former gods, but still, the change of faith was good for them. Yukito himself used the skill of the Lying No Man's Land, which gives him bonus points in long-range combat, but takes them away in close combat. With Charlotte at the head, he collects these bonuses, which are equal to a whole set of armor. If they continue like this, they will be able to easily defeat these goblins, and this will be able to raise the level of each of them. After all, no matter how much effort Yukito puts into elevating himself, without these two, he will not succeed. But no matter how he looked at this situation, it seemed deplorable, but quite advantageous for Munchkin. Despite this, they continued to fight. They managed to defeat the goblins that ran out at them, but they can't relax because there may be more goblins ahead. The guys need to move on. Looking at the map, Yukito said that the throne room was already right there, very close. But apparently, they were already expected. They walked down the corridor, ready, Charlotte in front, and the rest of them behind her. The guys were walking, looking around, when suddenly the walls began to shake, and then Lumilia screamed that something was happening behind them. A wall collapsed in front of them, and a large hand with a club appeared from a hole in it, which almost struck Charlotte, but Yukito warned it in time. The girl skillfully parried the blow, but the blow seemed terribly strong to her. When they looked there, they saw someone big. This creature did not look like a goblin, and was just finishing chewing someone's bone. There were 2 of them, an ogre and a troll. Ogres allied with goblins and the like, insatiable, mostly fond of elves, and also easily enraged, also extremely stupid. And trolls are constantly hungry, eating everything that moves in their path. But even if you cut off a limb, it will continue to move as if nothing had happened. This shocked the squad. Yukito knew there would be guards, of course, but he thought the goblins kept large beasts. During mapping, he noticed that there was a separate room where they carried large amounts of meat, but he didn't think the royal guards were a troll and an ogre. These are very strong enemies, tens of times stronger than any goblin. Charlotte didn't hesitate. She immediately jumped up and cut off the troll's hand with her sword. This, of course, stopped him a little, and it hurt. But after that, he raised his hand and simply put it where it should be. And in an instant his hand grew back, as if it had never been cut off. Charlotte was very puzzled by this. She did not expect it. Then Yukito realized how strong his regeneration was, so this battle would be harder than he thought. But he had to think through everything to defeat these creatures. And then the ogre turned his attention to Lumilia, because she was an elf. The ogre rushed towards the girl, and she shot an arrow at him from her bow, but it didn't help much. It felt like he didn't even feel it. The ogre started saying that he would eat her, the elf woman. He raised his weapon over her and said that she would die. Not Lumilia managed to dodge, and then Yukito decided to use something. The boy remembered telling Lumilia that she could choose any animal companion. At that moment, the girl explained to him that when she lived in the village, she always had a black wolf with her, and she would like him to be her companion. But Lumilia's black wolf was killed by Garzamug, so she had to choose another animal for this status. But to do this, she would have to pray at the edge of the forest. First, she had to choose a new one, but she had to choose the strongest one. The guy offered her 3 animals. The first was a black bear, which can make several attacks with its claws at once. The second was a snake, which can immobilize the enemy. And the third was a dire wolf, which can knock down the enemy as a bonus action. Also, besides those animals, there are also such as a hawk for reconnaissance, a badger for digging holes, a terrible rat, because if it attacks successfully, it can infect. There was also a marten. Large wild animals are much stronger than these animals. The little marten caught the girl's eye the most because it was so cute. But Yukito said that it was not suitable for fighting. The girl quickly agreed and, slightly upset, pointed to one creature that, if they got it, they could defeat the black dragon. She decided to choose a dinosaur. They are not extinct in this world, and Yukito would really like to see at least one. But, much to their regret, they will not be able to choose one until they reach at least level 9. The guy didn't know what to offer Lumilia, but then someone attracted him, but he understood that he wouldn't be able to get into the dungeon. But then he buried his face in the book with a cry. He realized that if she chose the animal he chose, then everything would work out for them. This is the #1 animal for Munchkin. And at the moment of his memories, 2 giant figures were already towering over Lumilia. The guy stood up and resolutely headed towards the monsters. And at that moment, he reached into his bag to take something from there. The giants kept saying that Lumilia had to be eaten because she was an elf or killed. And then Yukito decided to use what he wanted. The troll picked up a boulder and swung it at the boys. After this action, Yukito realized that things were bad. And at that moment, the giant threw that very boulder at them and almost hit, but the boys dodged it in time. Then Charlotte said that nothing was helping them anymore, and they needed to do something else. When the girls turned around, they didn't see Yukito, but then someone asked from the ceiling if they were okay. The girls looked up and saw a guy using a spider skill that allowed him to attach to different surfaces. Yukito knew perfectly well that he would die if even one shard hit him. The guy thought they had to defeat the ogre first, but that wouldn't change anything. So he called Lumilia and threw her his bag, which had something in it, and told her to use it. She ran and opened the bag, and something started coming out. It had tentacles. It was her animal companion, and it was an octopus. When it was fully out, Yukito began to chant a spell to make the octopus stronger. This was an increased spell, after which the animal companion increased in size, and also slightly increased the units of strength. This spell can be cancelled by a second decrease spell. Yukito shouted that he was leaving the troll on Lumilia, and then the girl ordered her companion Managarmr to attack the giant, and he fired ink directly into the enemy's eyes, blinding him for a while. This ink got into the giant's eyes and disrupted his coordination, although the octopus moves slowly on land, but the radius of its tentacles is 3 meters. Usually, living creatures do not live long in a storage bag, but they put the octopus in a bag of seawater. Even though the troll was now blinded, they still had one big problem, which was the ogre. He was rushing right at Lumilius and swung his axe at her, saying that he would eat her. Charlotte quickly dashed to Lumilius' side and was able to protect her friend from the blow of the ogre's axe. She said that she would not allow this overgrown man to hit her. The giant was terribly angry. He was furious. The mutant started screaming at the top of his lungs that he would eat the elf woman and the man, that he would eat them all. But the guys weren't going to give up, because they understood that there was no way back. Charlotte rushed to fight the enraged ogre alone. She hit him with everything, but mostly with her feet. Yukito shouted to her that it was very difficult and dangerous. But later he thought about it, because with strong regeneration it would be easier to defeat the troll, and after that he called Managarmer, Lumilia's animal companion, and threw him daggers. The octopus quickly grabbed the daggers and rushed into battle with them. This was a weapon skill. Usually, wild animal companions are not able to remember skills, much less learn them, but Yukito was able to write this in an empty column in his world book. Initially, he wanted the octopus to learn how to control the spiked chain, because then it would be able to double its attack radius, but this was only for very long-range combat, and it was inconvenient. Therefore, daggers were the best solution. The octopus pounced on the troll and squeezed him with its tentacles. This was an all-out attack, where it can perform up to 8 attacks at once. But then something went wrong. The troll managed to break free from the octopus's tight grip. Lumilia didn't expect this, but she reacted quickly enough. She took her bow and started shooting arrows at the giant. But they seemed to pass by him, or bounce off. The overgrown boy grabbed a large stone and, raising it above his head, began to aim at the girl's companion's animal. After that, he threw the boulder at the octopus with all his might, but the girl pointed her bow at the troll and decided to try shooting at him. As soon as the arrow pierced the giant's body, he immediately fell to the ground as if dead. As it turned out, the elf's arrow was saturated with poison, and since it is much cheaper than using magic, it turns out that they decided to cover all the daggers with various types of poison. Octopuses don't have a strong attack, but it's still pretty hard to succeed against all 8 of his attacks at once. That's why poison daggers are necessary, even essential, just in case. Yukito told Lumilia that it was time for her pet to go back to the bag containing the seawater, otherwise he wouldn't be able to fight and wage war on land any longer. Then the girl wanted to put him there, but then they looked at each other. The girl began to stroke her companion and say how good he was, that he was a good boy. After that, the octopus carefully embraced Lumilia with all his tentacles, and they began to hug each other, thus showing tenderness and love. But then there was another loud crash. Stones and boulders flew in all directions. All of this almost hit Charlotte, so the guy started to worry and asked if everything was okay. But the girl said that she was fine, and they all needed to be more careful so that something worse didn't happen. And then an enraged ogre crawled out of a hole in the wall, looking straight at the boys, and in his hands he held his large club. This huge creature leaned against the wall, and under its weight and force, a piece broke off from it. Seeing the people, he began to say that they needed to be killed, and also that the elf woman needed to be killed, and then eaten. He repeated the same thing over and over again. He said he wanted to kill them all. He moved very slowly. The guys were ready to attack. Charlotte stood with a sword in her hands. Lumilia held a bow and looked at this creature, and Yukito was still sitting on the wall and watching, because he was almost without protection. Charlotte shouted to her friends to back up and hide. She would try to deal with him herself at the forefront. When the ogre swung his club at the girl, she didn't think twice and quickly struck with her long sword. After which, the giant flew into the wall with the girl, leaning on her with his whole body. Here, Yukito got very scared, shouted the girl's name, because he was worried about her. The girl was lying on the concrete floor, covered in dirt and blood, but she didn't let go of the sword. Lumilia immediately rushed to her aid, because if this continued, they would not succeed. The girl jumped, trying to hit the ogre, but he simply swatted her away with his hand, thus knocking her down. Because of which, the girl fell back to the floor. And then the giant turned all his attention to her, saying that he needed to eat her. Yukito used a spell on the ogre to help the girls escape. It was a sleep spell that puts any living creature within a 6-meter radius of the caster to sleep. It is impossible to wake up creatures under the spell by normal means, but this spell cannot work on undead. The ogre, of course, began to stagger. The guy said that they should use this moment to get closer to Charlotte, but the ogre could resist this spell, because Yukito was a joint class with the bandits, so his spell level is lower than it could be. But they need to get close to the girl to give her the potion. Then Lumilia, as a first-level ranger, used the Hunter's Mark spell, causing a target mark to appear on the ogre's forehead. This mark allows you to deal additional damage to the marked creature, and also gives +4 points to tracking this creature. After that, Lumilia pointed her bow at the giant and began shooting at him. The arrows flew right into the target, as if it were supposed to be so. But something went wrong, and the ogre got even more angry. He raised his axe over the girl's head again, trying to strike. And then Yukito crawled out of his hiding place and rushed to help Lumilia. The guy cast a sliding spell that creates a thick layer of fat on the floor in a 3 by 3 meter square. In this area, creatures lose their agility and can fall prone if they fail to attack. As soon as this layer of slippery liquid appeared under the ogre, he immediately tried to stay on his feet because he began to slide. But he still failed and eventually fell to the floor. Yukito asked Lumilia if she was okay, but the girl was more interested in her friend's condition than her own. But then something strange started to happen again. The wall shook again and collapsed right next to the guys. A club was stuck into the wall where Yukito was standing and where Lumilia was standing. When they looked in the opposite direction, they saw a giant looking at them with great fury. At the moment when this ogre was leaving, Yukito dropped the potion that they wanted to give to Charlotte to make her feel better. The potion that Yukito dropped was almost next to Charlotte. She tried to reach it, but she simply did not have the strength. Meanwhile, Yukito and Lumilia were thinking about how to resist this monster that was looking at them. They were preparing to attack. It was total chaos. Pieces of walls and stones were flying around. Lumilia skillfully dodged them and tried to shoot the ogre with her bow. The girl was very lucky that he had a mark on him. Lumilia shot at him, but at that moment, rocks fell down and hit her. Lumilia simply fell to the ground, because these rocks hit her all over her body. Yukito realized that things were bad, because this ogre looked stronger and bigger than usual. The giant grabbed a boulder in his hands and, saying that the elf woman should be killed and the rest of the people should be made into his toys, wanted to throw it at Lumilia. Watching all this, Charlotte decided that she should not lie aside, she should help the guys, and again, tried to reach the potion to drink it. She kept saying that she had to protect her friends. And then a sparkle appeared behind the ogre, right where Charlotte was. She was able to reach the potion and drink it. This gave Yukito and Lumilia hope. Charlotte has gained a new skill, the power of rage. Now, once a day, she can receive a blessing from the god of rage, which increases her strength and agility by 2 points, and her weapons can now deal additional damage. This will allow her to fight the ogre and even the odds. The ogre noticed Charlotte and walked straight towards her. At that moment, the girl put her hand on her heart and cast a spell of divine favor, after which she looked confidently at the monster. This spell is available from level 1. It gives the caster's weapon an additional chance to deal radiant damage, as well as 2 points to saving throws. The girl raised her sword, held it out in front of her, and then ran to attack the giant. The girl ran straight at the ogre, and then began to strike. Screams and groans could be heard from there. From all this confusion, sword swings could be seen. Charlotte was well aware of what she was doing. The girl delivered her final blow, which was shining. She hit the orc right in the right place, so that it would be the decisive blow. After that, the giant caught fire and began to scream that he was very hot, and that a bad man had cursed him. And then suddenly, an arrow hit the flaming ogre. Lumilia was shooting at him from behind, and Yukito was watching everything that was happening around him. The giant had almost burned out, but he still wanted to pay off his offender. When he just brought his hand to the girl, he turned into ashes. Charlotte didn't even twitch an eye, as if she had calculated everything. The ogre fell right in front of her feet, and then, as she put her sword in its sheath, she said that under no circumstances should a paladin be underestimated. One of the goblins ran into the throne room where the king of these creatures was and said that adventurers had invaded them. The Lord ordered to collect all their weapons and kill the intruders because they wanted to take his victims for Lord Garzamug. The goblins started to tell that there was one guy and one woman. The other goblins picked up and started shouting that, yes, there was a girl there, and there was also an elf woman with them. To which the king said that an elf was very good, the black dragon would be very happy with their find. And with a sharp blow, he pierced a rat running past, comparing it to adventurers. The Lord ordered to catch the girls as victims for the master, the black dragon, and to kill, tear apart, eat, or torture the boy. He gave all this to his subordinates to choose from. At this point, Yukito had completely climbed down from the wall to look around, and Charlotte had approached Lumilia to ask how she was feeling and if she was okay. As the boy walked around the dungeon, he thought about gathering important things, but they had to hurry. Suddenly the boys heard footsteps and immediately realized that more goblins were coming. They stood ready for battle. Lumilia took up her bow, and Charlotte grabbed her sword. They were not mistaken. A whole horde of these evil creatures ran out at them. Apparently they still dealt with the armored zombie, which the guys sent to distract the villains. Now they will have to make their way further on their own. Yukito called out to Charlotte, who immediately understood what he wanted from her. She used a whirlwind attack, which caused a strong wind and knocked many goblins off their feet. The girl took out her spiked chain, which was custom made by a skilled blacksmith. This chain allows one to use agility instead of strength if the one who uses it is good at it. It also allows one to strike from a greater distance, which is 3 meters. And then the girl began to swing the chain, attacking all the goblins in that radius. And Lumilia at this time attacked everyone with a bow. When they managed to get further, Yukito used a stealth spell that allows him to remain invisible to enemies, and for others to notice him, they need to pass a perception or visibility check. The whole squad made their way further, hiding behind the pillars. Eventually, they got to the very doors of the throne room, but there were no guards near them, which was very strange. Apparently, an ambush would be waiting for them inside the room, and this would not be the best of all possible options. Looking at his map, Yukito noticed that in front of them was the Goblin King's room, and there was another small room just a little bit further away. The food the guy had thrown there was first taken there, apparently to test the poison. It turns out that all the imprisoned girls were there, and if Sana was in this castle, then she was in that room with all the girls. The boy suddenly imagined the face of his younger sister, and abruptly jumped to the door, stopping right before entering inside, but unfolded one of the magic scrolls. He used the Detect Evil spell to check. His eyes instantly flashed white, and everything around him began to play with different spectra. He saw evil as if they were illuminated by a white glow. By using this spell, a person can feel and see the aura of evil things, evil creatures and objects, and also sense their location. Yukito could clearly sense every creature behind the door, and he knew that if they just rushed in, there would be chaos. But if he cast the spell a little to the right of the center, then all the hostages would be safe and sound. The guy decided to try. There is noise in the room. The goblins are shouting over each other, impatiently waiting for someone. They await a new sacrifice. The Goblin King sits on his throne, happy that he has managed to lure the foolish adventurers. Suddenly, some sounds are heard behind the door. The goblins are puzzled by what this sound is, when suddenly a small hole appears in the door. The goblins begin to prepare for an attack. On the other side of the door, there's a guy in a gas mask, drilling a hole in the door. Suddenly, he sticks his hand into this hole and holds a 3rd-level scroll in his hands. The Goblin King tenses up as the scroll in the boy's hands burns away, turning into the Poison Cloud spell. This spell creates a deadly poisonous cloud that kills anyone below 2nd level and affects a 9-meter square. The goblins begin to cough and choke. One of them speaks of magical poison. The Goblin King orders his subordinates to kill the invader who is behind the door. A key appears in the guy's hands, and with the help of the key, placing his palm on the door, he uses the spell, Close. This spell magically locks all doors and chests. To open doors or chests, you must use the spell Lock, Open, or destroy the item. The goblins try to open the door, try to break it, but they fail. The guy is still holding the spell, and the goblins are screaming and asking to open the door. The goblins are panicking and don't know what to do. They grab their throats, try to close their eyes from the smoke, but they continue to choke. One of his companions wanted to know if he would be home soon, but fell silent mid-sentence. His 2 companions are standing nearby and waiting for him. The guy tells them that he hasn't finished yet. The guy presented a plan of the building and informed his companions that the poison had already filled the part of the room he needed, and most likely, the ordinary goblins were already dead. However, he informs them that perhaps the Goblin King is a shaman, and it will take much longer for him to die. Suddenly, the Goblin King began to speak. He asked if this was the coward. He began to spell out the boy's name, and with each letter the king pronounced, the faces of the boy and the girls became anxious. After pronouncing the hero's name, the goblin began to say various unflattering words to him. The girls stand worriedly, and the guy just smiled at his words, making it clear that he doesn't care. He tells the goblin that this world spares no one, and he will still die if he makes a mistake. The hero continues to say that he doesn't care about his curses. He is ready to use his 11-foot pole to check all the stone bridges before walking across them. After they completed the goblin killing quest, they freed all the girls who were imprisoned in the last room. However, no matter how much the hero looked for his little sister, she was not there. The hero read his book while Charlotte and Lumilia treated the girls. The girls look at the guy sadly and express their regrets about his sister and try to cheer him up. The hero tries to convince them that he is okay. He looks at the Temple of Evil, drawn on the map. He assumes that the main quest related to Sana is located there, and most likely Serena was kidnapped there. By completing the quest, they received 4,000 experience points and increased their levels. Now they must head to the Temple of Evil and fight the Black Dragon Garzo Mug. Their levels were still too low to fight the dragon, but they had very little time left. They needed to find Serena and Sana before the sacrifice. The hero goes into the room where the corpses lay, and behind him stood frightened girls. Following the hero, the girls begin to enter the room. The hero stops and turns around, about to say something. He asks Charlotte and Lumilia to take the girls outside and assures them that he will be there soon. He could not let the girls see what he was about to do. He collected all the corpses and burned them. The hero prayed for them and then decided to collect everything he could. The guy uses the spell Detect Magic. This spell helps to find magical objects, creatures, and people who have magic, as well as determine their strength and aura. Several bags of gold and jewelry, packed to the brim, appear in front of the guy. The hero collects the magic items in his bag, thinking about what use these things will bring, and in the worst case, they can be sold. And Munchkin can't sell Rocinante's horn over and over again. He finds a magic mirror that was probably used for some dark ritual. The guy examines it and decides to take it with him. And even if he can use it, he will simply sell it at a high price. There is a dungeon in the city of Orbeda. In this dungeon, in one of the cells, deep in the shadows, someone sits and grumbles incessantly. The prisoner bit his nails until they bled, repeating over and over how he would kill the damned followers of the evil goddess. An expensively dressed man approaches his cell and with a very friendly face addresses him, asking if he is the cleric who tried to kill the adventurers. He begins to remember his name. Behind bars sits a bald, skinny guy with crazy eyes. The man calls him by his name, Lang Eisen. The guy jumps up and grabs the bars. He calls the guy Guildmaster and screams that he is not guilty. He begins to explain that he was trying to punish those who believe in the evil goddess and calls them evil. The Guildmaster just smiles and calmly says that he knows about it. He opens the grate. Lang Eisen, not believing his eyes, asks the man if he is really releasing him. To this, the Guildmaster only solicitously says that he should come out quickly, because it is probably cold in the cell. After the guy left the cell, the Guildmaster suggests going upstairs and telling him about his attempts to kill the believers and about the believers in the evil goddess in more detail. The guy is happy that Osmar noticed his actions, however, he had to interrupt his thoughts. A man holding a torch invites him to follow him, but the guy stands still. The guy calls the Guildmaster, his eyes are closed. There is a pause between them. And after the pause, the guy asks why. The guy asks why the Guildmaster is surrounded by an evil aura. The man realized that the guy used a detect evil spell. The guy turns around and tries to run away, but the man uses the spell Consciousness Explosion. Eisen falls to the ground and cannot move. The man approaches him and says that he thought Eisen would calmly and voluntarily tell all the information about the believers of the goddess Nephilia. The man begins to transform. His face begins to change. The human pupils disappear, and other pupils appear in their place, clearly not human. The face, hands, body begin to change, and the guy does not believe his eyes. The Guildmaster transforms into the monster Illitid, with an octopus-like head and long black nails. The guy says that no one would even think about being a man, but the monster interrupts him, saying that the memories of the Guildmaster were very tasty. The guy starts thinking about how he can escape, but the monster grabs the boy by the neck and lifts him up. He tells him that, as a being of high intelligence, he is disgusted by using such a primitive method. The monster opens its mouth with many small teeth, intending to find out directly from the brain what kind of followers of the evil goddess these are. Its tentacles pierce the guy's head. After the hero and his companions had earned enough experience to level up, they decided to linger in the village of Arda for a while. The basket fell to the ground, and all the vegetables rolled around. The villagers couldn't believe their eyes as their girls, who had been kidnapped by the goblins, ran towards them. The parents hugged their girls and cried with joy. The hero and his companions stood to the side and joyfully watched this picture. The residents approached the girls' saviors and bowed to them, expressing their sincere gratitude. One of the residents holds out a small bag of money, offering to take it as a token of gratitude. The blonde with long hair begins to shyly refuse the money. The hero takes out a scroll and says words that grant a short, peaceful rest. Suddenly the girl falls, disturbing the villager. The hero caught her and assured the villager that the girl fell asleep because she was very tired from the fight, and there was no need to worry about it. The elf carefully holds the girl, and the hero begins to drink the potion of intelligence. The guy, having drunk the potion, looked at the resident very strangely, thereby frightening him. The hero begins to tell the resident that no matter how painful it is for him to talk about it, but during the rescue of the girls, they incurred various expenses. They used healing potions, equipment, magic scrolls, and other items. Having counted all this, the hero wrote down the amount on paper and gave it to the villager. The villager was outraged by the amount. However, the hero reminded him of the risk they had taken to save the girls. The man was still thinking about paying the amount when his daughter came up to him and told him that these adventurers had saved her life. Then the man agreed to pay for their services. Munchkin held a bag of coins in his hands, and the villagers thanked him for saving their daughters and asked him to accept his gift. He stuffed the bag of money into his bag, agreeing to accept such a gift. The hero does not trust random numbers and does not pray to dice, and when they have to trust random numbers, they have to do it under buffs. In an inn located in the city of Orbeda, the hero and his companions are sorting through gold and jewelry. Charlotte notices that he has taken too much, but he answers her by explaining that this will be enough for them for now, not to worry about money. Charlotte hugs her horse and is glad that everything is all right with him. It seems to her that Rocinante's horn has shrunk, but the hero immediately convinces her otherwise, saying that it is her imagination. Lumilia holds an octopus in her hands, and it collects cubes. Charlotte watches them. The octopus has built houses from cubes and is pulling Lumilia by the hand. Lumilia and Charlotte start to be touched by the octopus. The hero sits down at the table and takes out the Book of Peace, intending to learn new skills. He opened the page with himself and started to correct the level. He crossed out the number 2 and wrote the number 3 next to it. The level has changed, although the hero did not feel any increase in strength. When choosing a trait, the hero begins to have problems. A trait is a special gift or training that gives a character special knowledge. A trait represents training, experience, and abilities beyond those gained by a class. Each trait can only be selected once. The hero considers traits like crossbow expert, attentive, which have a ton of useful skills, but he wants something else more than anything else. The hero chooses the accurate shooting trait, which will add extra HP to him. This skill does not add health in the usual way, so it is possible that it will ignore the curse, and the hero will be able to choose it. At first glance, it seems like this is a boring feature, but for the hero, it is a life preserver. Perhaps he can withstand one direct hit from the magic bolt. But the hero is in no hurry to choose this feature, as he wants to weigh everything carefully. The hero has no time left to level up. Since the hero can only use a trait once, he tries to be careful when choosing a skill. The hero is going to develop the wizard class, and aim to become a mystical trickster who has the characteristics of both a wizard and a rogue. He turns the page and stops at Charlotte and Lumilia, wondering what he should do with them. He thinks about changing Lumilia's class to a druid to improve her animal companion skills, while Charlotte decides to change her class to a barbarian to improve her attack skills. He closes the book, deciding to leave the class that seems more respectable to him. Charlotte asks if he left her as a warrior. Charlotte begins to explain that this is not suitable for her, as her family comes from a long line of paladins, but the hero remains adamant. In Charlotte's head, terrifying images of warriors appear. Paladins are a class that really scales well over time, so it's best for her to continue leveling up. However, at the moment, they don't have time to do that. The girl understands this, but the warriors seem wild to her. The hero calms her down, saying that the warriors have many useful skills at low levels. The girl says that in her hometown, warriors are called heroic, fantastic, almighty, and are respected no less than paladins. Charlotte and Yukito were talking about something when suddenly, something started to glow from the bag of gold. The guy and his companions scream, and from the bag, from the mirror, comes light with a dark aura. The hero looks tensely towards the mirror, and fragments of words can be heard from him. The words became clearer, and from the mirror someone called Shimiza. The guy and his companion stood in confusion and looked at the mirror, and from the mirror someone impatiently continued to call Shimiza and demanded a report. The girls repeated the name and wondered if it could be the mirror, the connection between the Goblin King and the Temple of Evil. The mirror kept demanding a report. The hero realized that if they were seen, it would turn into trouble for them, and immediately used a camouflage spell. The disguise spell can completely change the appearance, including clothes. It is also possible to turn into an animal or a monster, but only if it was seen in the past. The hero, having completely transformed into the Goblin King, bowed before the mirror and answered. Charlotte grabbed the blanket that was lying on the bed and covered herself and the elf, also creating a background for the hero. A man in a black robe appeared in the mirror and asked the goblin about the process of preparing a sacrifice for Mr. Garzamug, because there was not much time left before the full moon ritual. The hero tells him that he hasn't had time to prepare everything yet, thereby angering the man in the mirror. This was an important ritual in which Lady Nephilia chose her medium. The robed man warned the hero that if he failed to complete the task in time, his blood would be used as compensation. The guy replied that he understood him, and the man in the robe once again ordered him to prepare everything for the sacrifice and disappeared. The Goblin King sat in front of a mirror that no longer showed the man in the robe, and the elf sat behind a blanket hugging her pet. The image of the Goblin King completely falls off the guy, and he does not believe that they managed to deceive him. The girls let go of the blanket and come out of their hiding place. The guy went to the mirror and closed it. He told the girls that it was a priest from the Temple of Evil, and most likely the Goblin King is connected to him. Charlotte noticed that the priest was very angry about something, and the hero shared his thoughts that most likely the news about the goblins had not reached them yet. The guy tries to find a way to take advantage of this situation. They talk among themselves about a medium for the goddess, and about the ritual of the moon's calamity. They think about their older sister Serena, and the boy opens a book and reads about her. Someone knocks on the door, thereby frightening the guy and his companions. A voice comes from behind the door, introducing itself as Mildest, the guildmaster of the Adventurers Guild. Charlotte and Yukito are confused about what the guildmaster is doing here. The man asks to open the door and says that he has something to discuss with them. Yukito grabs the handle but is in no hurry to open it. He exchanges glances with the girls. He opens the door and sees the guildmaster standing in front of him. Their eyes meet, and Yukito is shocked by what he sees. The guildmaster smiles and says that he has wanted to meet Yukito for a long time. Yukito asks again, to which the man answers affirmatively. The man's gaze stops on the Book of Worlds in Yukito's hands. Guildmaster and Yukito look at each other without taking their eyes off each other. The monster spoke to Yukito, breaking the silence between them. He reminded him of the priest who tried to kill them, and asked for his apology for allowing such a dangerous man to roam free. The girls offer the Illithid to go into the room, to which the monster agrees and thanks the girls, enters. Yukito doesn't move from his place and starts searching for something in the Book of Worlds, noticing a different worldview in the guildmaster. He throws the book away, causing surprise among the girls. Yukito shouts for them to get away from him. The looks on the boy and the girls' faces became serious. The guildmaster pretends not to understand the guy's behavior, but the guy asks him why such a monster needed to come to him. The Illithid was open on the page of the book. The girls recoiled from it in fear. The monster notices how the hero figured him out so quickly. The guildmaster instantly transformed into a humanoid creature known as a mind flayer. This creature is considered the most evil and insidious, and has caused many disasters. Using its abilities, it can suck out brains and absorb memories. The elf stood hugging her octopus, and the octopus's axis reached out to the monster, calling him father. Charlotte takes out her sword and rushes at the monster with the spell Defeat Evil. The hero does not have time to stop her, as the monster uses magic. The monster uses the, quote, mind explosion spell, which is unique to racial creatures. The girls and the boy fall, paralyzed by the spell. The guy lies without the ability to move, and next to him is the Book of Worlds. The girl asks the guy to run, and the monster bends over Yukito. The monster thinks, but seeing the book, he reaches out his hand to it. But the monster is hit by a powerful electric shock, almost burning his hand. The monster pulls his hand back, and the guy looks at the monster in shock. The monster knew that only an alien could take the book. The monster reveals its multiple tiny teeth, explaining that it has no other choice. He leans over the boy, about to devour him. A guy is sitting at a table, hugging his book. Opposite him sits an Illithid. The monster looks at the guy while the guy sleeps peacefully. The boy regains consciousness and exclaims how everything turned out this way. The monster reassures him, assuring him that their race is very intelligent and noble, and that he just wants to talk in private. The guy asks about Charlotte and Lumilia, but as it turns out, they were sleeping peacefully outside. The monster gets straight to the point, asking if the boy and his female companions would like to join his united front. The hero sits stunned and asks him again about the united front. It turns out that all this time, they were watching the hero and his companions. They also know that the guy has a connection with Nephilia, and the book that is in the guy's hands used to belong to her. The monster asks Yukito about his knowledge of the book. Yukito says that it is the book of the world, and it contains all the information about this world. The monster says that this is not true. It turns out that it wasn't just an encyclopedia, it was a rule book that could interfere with the logic of this world. It is a thing of the gods that everyone wants to get. But at the moment, only Yukito can use it. The hero asks the monster about the possibility of the book being transferred to the monster if he kills the guy. The monster considered this outcome of events as well. However, the Illithid was afraid that after death, the book might return to the evil goddess. He could not miss the chance to catch the goddess, which comes once every 10,000 years. Yukito asks about the monster's purpose. The monster's goal is to kill the evil goddess Nephilia and suck out her brain. At the monster's last statement, Yukito looked at it in confusion. The monster's mouth began to water at the thought of the taste of her brains, and the power he could gain from tasting them. The boy's expression changed completely, and the monster noticed this and asked for forgiveness, wiping himself with a handkerchief. The monster explains that even such a formidable Illithid cannot resist the goddess. But it is another matter when the book of the world that controls the logic of the world is lost, and the goddess has become vulnerable. Plus, the goddess was going to come down soon to find her book. The guy didn't know about it and was very shocked by this information. At the moment, the goddess is spending all her energy searching for this book. The monster was surprised that a man who was just a pawn in her board game managed to steal the book from her. The guy asks again about the board game. It turns out that the evil goddess Nephilia takes people from another world whenever she wants and plays with their lives and destinies like game pieces. Memories flashed through the boy's head, which made him feel sick, and he grabbed his heart. The guy thought that everything that happened was not an accident. That demon was sent to kill them and summon them into this world. The guy lowers his head onto the book and doesn't believe that everything that happens is just for the sake of the game. The boy raises his head and looks menacingly at the Illithid. This look makes the monster feel uneasy. The guy asks about the united front and about the task that the hero and his companions have to complete. The monster smiles at his words. The monster asks the boy to attract the attention of the goddess, and while she desperately tries to get the book back, the Illithid will kill her and eat her brain. The hero interpreted the monster's words, saying that he was going to use them as bait. The monster said that they were just using each other, and after these words, the guy asked the monster to help them defeat the Black Dragon. Since they would be a united front, the boy wanted the monsters to fight alongside them. Unfortunately, the monsters can't do that. If the Illithids fight, the goddess will notice them and return to the realm of the gods. Besides her, various hostile races are watching the monsters. Even talking to Yukito is dangerous for the Illithid. An act like saving people would stand out, and therefore monsters should avoid such actions. The guy wondered what the benefit would be for them then. The girls were sleeping, but the sound of the door opening made them wake up. Having finally woken up, they saw Yukito at the door. The guy asked if they were okay, to which the girls answered affirmatively. And they were very glad that the hero was alive. Yukito addresses Charlotte and Lumilia with an important message. An Illithid appears at the door, and the hero informs them of the alliance with the Illithid. The girl was very shocked by the guy's decision. The Illithid transforms back into the guildmaster and is about to leave. He approaches the boy and places his hand on Yukito's shoulder, saying that he will pray for his success in his fight. The guy and his companions watch the monster leave. Charlotte asked the boy if he had thought it through and advised him to think again. Illithids are lawful evil and most likely consider human life to be no more than the life of an insect. But the hero and his companions will need their help. They just decided to use each other. As a munchkin, he decided to do everything to achieve the goal. The guy calms Charlotte down and asks her not to worry about it. They watch the monster go, but the hero's mind is filled with thoughts of his goal to save Sana, and he is ready to do anything for her. In the shopping district of Orbita City, a conversation about a magic shop comes up. A blonde man explains to Yukito how to get to the magic shop, on the sign of which the contemplator is carved. The blonde, doubting whether to say this or not, begins to tell that despite the quality goods, the owner of the store is a little strange. The guy walks down the street, looking for that very shop. He stopped in front of a store and saw an unusual sign with a carved image of the contemplator. Yukito opens the door. In the magic item shop, there are a lot of different things. Many potions stand on the shelves, and various magic swords, shields, cloaks hang on the walls. The guy looks at all this and is surprised by the objects that he has never even seen before. He takes one of the potion bottles and starts sneezing from the dust that was on it. Yukito begins to doubt that the store is open. He stops in front of a sword in the form of a star, in the middle of which stands a shield. The hero reads the characteristics of it in the book and learns that this shield can be used both for defense and attack. At first glance, it seems convenient, but in fact, it is very difficult to use. Next, he moves on to the chameleon cloak and learns that by wearing it, he will gain a bonus to camouflage and will be able to use the invisibility spell once per day. He approaches the swords, examines them, and stops in front of the sword with 4 daggers. He takes it in his hands with interest. Suddenly, the blade starts spinning, and the guy gets scared by the sword's unexpected actions. While the hero was panicking and unable to stop the blade, the shop owner came out to him and rudely asked him what he was doing. The guy apologizes, and the owner comes up to him, takes the sword, and simply throws it back. The sword stops in the owner's hands. Yukito tells the man that he came to buy magical items, and the owner, after his words, looked at the guy very strangely. He looked him over from head to toe, which made the guy feel uncomfortable. The man said that such a young guy would not be able to afford anything in the shop of magic items and weapons. The guy smiled at his words. The guy turns the bag over, and a huge amount of jewelry and gold pours out. The man is shocked by what he sees, and the guy smiles at him. The man watches as the guy chooses the things he needs. The guy, holding the book in his hands, takes one potion after another, declaring that he needs it. Unable to bear this sight, the man stops Yukito. He asks Yukito if he is taking too much, then explains that if he is going underground, he will not need so much. He jokingly asks if he is going to start a war. The guy only responded affirmatively to his joke with a completely serious look. The man looking at the guy looked away. He says that he has been evaluating magic items for many years, so he can tell the level of adventurer's abilities. He says that the guy looks like a mage, but the man assumes that the guy can't even use a fireball. Having learned this spell, a person becomes a full-fledged magician. The boy put 1 jar of potion into the filled basket. The man approached the battered sword and said that he too had once been an adventurer. He says that not far from them, there was a dungeon into which he dived with his friends. They found treasure, although not in such quantity as the guy. The man's look became sad, and he said that his entire squad died in that dungeon. He looked at the boy and advised him, for his own sake, to stop. The man persuades Yukito not to put himself in danger, to stop and to continue on to the treasures he found. The boy slowly turned his head towards the man and spoke about the fear of death. With a confident look, Yukito says that no matter how scared he is to die, he cannot stop. He is ready for any outcome. The man carefully studies the guy. The man thought of the countless reckless adventurers who abandoned their peaceful lives for adventure. However, Yukito was not like that. In his eyes, there was a desire to survive at any cost. The shop owner realizes there is no point in even trying to stop the guy. The man asks the guy his name. The guy says his name, but suddenly the man's face changes. He sat down abruptly on the floor and looked at the guy in shock. The man opened and closed his mouth as if he was trying to say something, but remained silent. He stood up, pulled himself together, and said that his name just seemed unusual to him. He called the guy over and started collecting potions for him. He put 10 vials on the table, which stunned the guy. The guy looked at the potions in amazement, and the man said that he was giving them to him, since several healing potions would definitely be useful to Yukito. The boy tried to refuse them, as these potions were among the most expensive things. But the man was adamant. The boy thought about the strangeness of this man. The man went out to see the boy off. The boy looked at him one last time and left. The man stood with his arms crossed and watched the guy leave. The man thought about the number of years that had passed since his last conversation with someone from that world. As it turned out, the man was called into this world 39 years ago. He knew nothing then, but he continued to search for ways to return home. He fought monsters, sat in libraries, and studied many books. He remembers holding a book full of notes in his hands and crying from despair. He wanted with all his heart to find a way to return home, but now he lacks the willpower even for that. A man walks into a store and thinks about the young man and how he accepted death but continued to fight. He walked up to the same battered sword and touched the image of himself on it. He had long since become a non-player character. It doesn't matter anymore whether he is a hitman or not. Anyone who gives up his life as a protagonist becomes a non-player character. The man thought about the moment he gave up the fight, remembering the youth. In the backyard of the hotel, Charlotte stands among wooden pillars. The girl takes out her sword and cuts the pillars into small pieces. Then she puts the sword back in its sheath. The girl kneels down and begins to pray to Lord Luria and apologizes to him for becoming a warrior. Not far from Charlotte stands Lumilia with a bow in her hands and aiming at a tree. 3 petals start falling from the tree, and Lumilia uses her precision skill to release an arrow. 1 arrow pierces all 3 petals. Lumilia thinks about her feelings about her level up, and Charlotte rejoices at her success. The hostess of the hotel comes out to the girls in the backyard. Her gaze is stern. She asks the girls to follow her. The girls look at her in confusion, and then walk out of the backyard. In front of the girls, Yukito is standing on the street. The girls look at him worriedly, and the guy tells them that they have no money left for a hotel. The guy explains that he spent everything on preparing the equipment, and shows them the empty bag. Charlotte, worried, asks him again. The hostess stood with her arms crossed and looked at them sternly. Then she said that if they had no money, they should leave the hotel. Charlotte tried to stop her, but the owner closed the door in front of them, without even listening. Yukito calms the girls down and suggests they spend the night in the stable. Charlotte asks again, hoping she misheard. But the guy explains that if they sleep in the stable, their fatigue will not be restored, but they can restore their spell skills. But if they use the paladin's lay on hands skill, the recovery effect will be the same as resting in an inn. Yukito finishes his words by saying that they will be able to be with Rocinante. He thinks that the horse will only be glad of such company, since lately she has remained on the sidelines. The girl thought that this is not so bad. Night fell. There was a horse in the stable. 2 girls were sleeping next to it, their heads on its side, covered with straw. In the corner of the stable, Yukito was sleeping, leaning against the wall. The octopus was there, in a barrel of water. At the gates of the city, there were girls with a horse. Charlotte was petting the horse, and Lumilia was leaning against the wall. Charlotte was encouraging Rocinante. The girl looks strangely somewhere and asks Yukito if he is okay. He assures her that he is okay. Yukito was sitting in a bag that was hanging on a horse. It was a bag that could hold up to 230 kilograms, 1,800 liters, and yet it would only weigh 2 kilograms, no matter how much was put in it. Breathing creatures could stay in there for a minute before they would start to suffocate. Since only 2 people can ride on the Rocinante, this is the only way to get to the evil temple in time. As long as Yukito doesn't put his head in the bag, he can breathe freely in it. Charlotte is calmed by his words. Reading his Book of Worlds, he notices that the rules do not say how it cannot be used in this way. He flips through the pages and says that there are 6 days left until the ritual, and if everything goes well, tomorrow they will be able to get close enough to the Castle of Evil. Yukito gives the command to move out. The girls mount the horse and begin their journey. The horse gallops towards the mountains of black fog. Charlotte and Lumilia sit comfortably in the saddle, but the bag Yukito is sitting in is shaking violently. They galloped through the forests. The companions stopped to rest. Lumilia was preparing firewood for the fire. Her octopus was sitting next to her in a bucket of water. Charlotte was giving carrots to her horse and praising him. The girls on the horse turned to the sounds coming from Yukito, who was sitting facing the tree. Charlotte asked if he was okay. The guy, trying to hold back his urge to vomit, says he's fine. However, he starts vomiting again. Charlotte pats him on the shoulder, realizing he's not fine at all. A little later, all 3 are sitting by the fire. The hero uses a spell to create food and water. This spell creates food weighing 5 kilograms and water weighing 11 liters on the ground or in a container within a radius of 9 meters. Yukito notices that although there is a lot of food, it is not filling at all. He would like something hot and tasty. Lumilia gets up and leaves. After a while, she returns with a rabbit in her hands. Yukito rolls up his sleeves and decides to show what he can do, and asks the girls to help him too. Lumilia roasts meat on the fire, Yukito cooks soup, and Charlotte tries to cut an apple. They put the meat on the leaves, poured the soup into a deep bowl, and set the table. They sat and enjoyed the hot dishes. They sat by the fire, ate, and laughed. And next to them stood their horse. Yukito called the girls to hold a strategy meeting. The recommended level for attacking the castle is 6, but Yukito and Charlotte were level 3, and Lumilia was level 2. They won't be able to attack directly, especially with the black dragon. This dragon's mouth emits a powerful acid breath that can melt anything. Its brain is so smart that it can cast a spell. Its wings are fast, its claws are strong, its paws are heavy, and its scales are very thick. Even though the monster was young, it was still a monster, and the hero would be better off not encountering it. He doubts he will be as lucky as he was last time to escape it. He starts looking for ways when suddenly Lumilia starts listening. Lumilia suddenly pulled out her bow, which startled Charlotte. She aimed towards the trees, ready to release the arrow. Someone was approaching the companions. Yukito and the girls stood ready. Someone started to appear behind the trees. Orcs appeared on the clearing. They were barbarian predators, thirsty for blood and violence. They are not very smart, but they are good at using weapons and armor, and also know combat techniques. They are hostile to people, dwarves, but are especially harsh with elves. The girls screamed in fear. Yukito hid behind the trees and thought that the orcs were faster than he expected. The orcs saw the girls and demanded that they drop their weapons and surrender. One of them began to order the orcs what to do with the women, when suddenly an arrow pierced his body. Lumilia has activated the ranger skill Quick Shot. Thanks to it, she can use a free action to perform a long-range attack. The enraged orcs rushed at the girls. The orc with an axe rushed at Lumilia, thirsting for her death. But at the last moment, the elf was able to dodge. Octopussy splashed his ink into the orc's eyes, blinding him. After that, Lumilia shot the orc. Charlotte was also attacked by an orc, and she began to defend herself. The orc pressed with his axe, trying to break through the girl's defense, and kept saying that he would kill her. They were near a burning fire. The girl hooked her foot on the log that was on fire and threw it right at his face. The orc screamed in pain, and the girl prepared to attack him. Charlotte activates the warrior skill Powerful Strike and kills the orc. But from behind, another orc was about to attack Charlotte unnoticed. He wished death on Charlotte and rushed at her. Charlotte turned around, clearly not expecting an attack from behind. But Charlotte's horse parried the orc's blow. The orcs were shocked, but Charlotte was very happy to see Rocinante. The orcs looked at them and were angry. The archers prepared to shoot Charlotte and her horse. Yukito was afraid for them and used the magic Light of Protection. A barrier formed in front of the girl, preventing arrows from getting through. Charlotte, who had closed her eyes, opened one eye, and the orcs were surprised by the magic and began to look for him and the source. They saw Yukito and prepared to shoot him. The hero activated the item's power for the day. The guy put on a chameleon cloak and disappeared. Thanks to this cloak, the hero can receive a bonus to camouflage and additionally activate the invisibility skill once a day. The orcs were looking for the guy, but could not find him. This made them even more angry. The girls stood in a fighting stance. Only 4 orcs remained in front of them. They looked at each other, waiting for the moment to start the fight. The girls prepared to attack them. Suddenly, something whistled around them and knocked the girls and the horse to the ground. They instantly found themselves on the ground, and Yukito was shocked by the changed course of events. The spiked chain appeared in the air again, alarming the guy. The girls and the horse began to rise to their feet, and Yukito shouted from his hiding place for them to be careful. A huge orc, a combat class, came out into the clearing. The war orc stood in front of the girls and twirled a spiked chain in the air. With a loud cry, the orc directed his chain towards the girls. Suddenly, his chain began to wrap around Charlotte's sword. The orc pulled his chain towards himself, and the sword in Charlotte's hands followed the chain and, jumping out of Charlotte's hand, knocked her to the ground. Charlotte found herself in front of the orc. Suddenly, Charlotte received a powerful blow from the spikes right on her side. She was thrown against a tree with such incredible force that it simply broke. Yukito and the elf screamed. The elf charged. The orc tried to hit her with the spikes of the chain, but she deftly jumped and ran away from them. The elf shot at the orc, but the arrow simply bounced off him. This greatly shocked the elf, and the orc only smiled evilly. He started to twist his chain. All the orcs demanded the death of the elf. Yukito, under the chameleon robe, made his way closer to the orcs. His robe makes him invisible for a minute, but after he attacks, the invisibility wears off. Hitting the orc was his only chance. He begins to use the surveillance skill, which was a trait of the rogue skill, and allowed him to identify the enemy's weak points. he was able to identify the orc's weak point in the area of the rib. At the moment when the orc was about to attack Lumilia with his chain, the hero, pulling out a dagger, was about to strike the orc. Yukito uses a sneak attack skill, stabbing the knife directly into the area where it was weak. The orc screamed in pain, and Yukito was glad, believing that he was able to damage the monster. But after he pulled out the dagger, the orc did not fall to the ground. He began to slowly turn around to Yukito, angry, and Yukito gritted his teeth from failure. The orcs started talking to each other about Yukito. The huge orc was angry and was preparing to attack the boy. The orc began to swing his chain, preparing to attack him. Lumilia screamed in fear for Yukito, and the boy thought that the spiked chain, although considered a powerful weapon, was only suitable for long-range combat. The guy started to circle around the orc. A small ball appeared in his hands. He used a smoke ball, which has the same effect as a smoke spell for 1 round. Raises a smoke screen in a radius of 4.5 meters, centered on the user. Creatures inside this smoke are difficult to see from the outside. After the smoke cleared, neither the elf nor the boy were in the clearing. Charlotte lay among the trees, out of breath. She uses the paladin skill, Lay on Hands, which is able to heal the wounds of anyone touched by the paladin's hands. She jumps up and finds herself completely healthy. The girl remembers the great holy sword. She remembers how Yukito gave her this holy spear at the inn. It was a useful weapon, as it could also be used as a throwing weapon. At the time Yukito gave her the spear, she tried to refuse it, as such a weapon was unbecoming of a paladin. But Yukito persuaded her, saying that it was used by the Holy Lord Regdar himself. The girl smiled at the memory. The orcs were searching for a magic user. But it is worth noting that there was one more orc. Suddenly, some sounds were heard, which made the orcs tense up. Charlotte, on her horse, rode straight towards them, ready to attack. Seeing the girl, the huge orc began to twirl his spiked chain, preparing to attack her. The distance between them was getting smaller and smaller. The orc threw his chain right at the girl. However, the horse managed to dodge the attack. The orc began to twirl his chain again, and Charlotte swung her spear, preparing to throw. Charlotte performs a raid on an orc. A human riding a creature can perform a raid if the attacker and target are unobstructed, and the distance is 6 meters or more. She thrusts the spear straight into the orc's heart. Suddenly, the spear explodes inside the orc, creating a huge hole in his body. Charlotte herself did not expect the explosion and was very surprised by it. The orc swayed but didn't fall. He was still alive. He was breathing heavily and was very angry. The girl got into a fighting stance, and the orc looked at the hole that had formed in his chest. The orc stood next to the giant. He looked at him and ordered him to give him his weapon. But suddenly the orc pulled back his weapon, as a sign of refusal. He called the giant a fool who does not even know how many comrades he has. That extra orc was Yukito. He swung his weapon and struck. After throwing the storage bag toward Charlotte under the smoke ball, he transformed into one of the orcs, using a camouflage spell. In fact, the warrior, Rude, was defeated. The orcs stood and looked at his dead body. Arrows flew towards the 3 orcs and pierced their bodies. Lumilia prepared for another shot. The last orc ran away, but collided with someone. It was Rocinante, ready to trample the last orc. Yukito ran towards the horse, asking it to stop as he still needed to ask this orc something. Charlotte called the horse to her. Charlotte approached Yukito with Rocinante. She handed him the bag. And then, she told him with displeasure about the spear that exploded. The guy replied that he attached an explosive potion to the tip. The girl began to be indignant, since the paladin cannot use such a cowardly weapon. The guy began to calm her down. The guy said that he had blessed it in the temple, and then it was considered a sacred explosive. As soon as the girl learned that the explosives were sacred, she immediately calmed down, stating that everything was fine. The adventurers were standing in the clearing among the orc corpses. The girls asked the guy if he knew about the attack in advance. The guy tied the prisoner's hands and answered in the affirmative. Earlier in Orbita City, he had collected information related to the quote-unquote of evil. This temple in the Black Mist Mountains became a stronghold of believers only 2 years ago. Before that, it was the Zoa Gu High Temple. The girls asked again in alarm, and in their minds an image of a monster arose, which was the evil dwarven god of darkness, worshipped by the orcs and goblins. However, thanks to the Black Dragon, the believers captured the Zoa Gu High Temple. It seemed that the Goblin King they killed was originally a priest of this temple. The goblins surrendered and joined the Temple of Evil, and the rest of the students of Zoa Ji Yu Hai fled and hid in the forest or underground. The hero reached into the orc's pocket and took out an amulet. He showed it to the orc and asked him if everything was really like that. He showed the girls the amulet, Zoa Ji Yu Hai. Charlotte looked at him worriedly. The orcs silently looked away. In the end, they were unable to reclaim their temple and turned into a bunch of bandits attacking adventurers. The orc got angry and yelled at the hero, calling him a bastard. The hero suddenly pulled out his dagger and pointed it straight at the orc. The hero's gaze was serious. The hero ordered the orc to take them to the base to negotiate with their leader. Charlotte tried to stop Yukito. Yukito explains his reasons for his actions, saying that the evil temple is their common enemy, and if the negotiations go well, they can unite. But Charlotte still has doubts. The guy tells her that he will use everything he can, and they have nothing to lose, since they have already united with the Illithid. Charlotte looked at the elf with concern. The boy pointed the dagger at the orc again and asked about the situation in the Temple of Evil. Yukito asked if he was going to talk. The orc simply spat in Yukito's face. The girls looked at them in shock. The orc refused to answer Yukito's questions. Yukito angrily grabbed the orc's mouth and pushed him to the ground. He told the orc promisingly that he was sure he wanted to talk soon. The hero uses the spell Create Food, and the orc's mouth starts to fill with food. The girls stand even more shocked by what is happening. The hero asks the orc if he wants to talk. The orc lay with his mouth full. Tears were flowing from his eyes and snot from his nose. The hero noticed how sad it was. In the following minutes, Yukito could be heard using food creation magic several times. There, deep in the forest, there is a large castle. It was an abandoned castle. The castle had long staircases and stone walls. In the throne room of this castle, someone was sitting on the throne. An orc serves wine in an elegant glass. An elegant female hand takes the glass, but does not drink, but tilts it slightly. This action makes the orc nervous. She threw the glass away, spilling the wine and breaking it. She screamed indignantly at the servants of the Temple of Evil. She said that it was not so difficult to deal with them. The orc stood in fear, looking at her. She says that if the black dragon had not been there, they would have captured it long ago. At that moment, an old orc enters and calls for Lady Raverna. He kneels before her and tells her that a squad of orcs captured prisoners in the forest. The woman was surprised because they did not take prisoners but killed them immediately. The old man says that they beheaded the man, imagining a squad of orcs standing over the girls. He says that there were a couple of beautiful girls there who were a noblewoman and an elf. They were Charlotte and Lumilia. The woman smiled maliciously. She began to think about her next steps in relation to the girls. She decided to sell them to slave traders, and perhaps ask for a ransom for the noblewoman. The woman ordered them to be brought in so that she could examine them. On the throne sat Lady Raverna, the priestess of darkness. The girls stand chained up, around the orcs, in front of Raverna. The queen looked at them appraising Ly and said that they were indeed beautiful. She called Urud to reward him, but another orc informed the queen that Urud had taken his subordinates and gone to plunder the village. The woman was pleased with the orc's enthusiasm. She looked somewhere and asked what it was. Behind the girls stood the prisoner Yukito and held something in his hands, covered in white material. He approached the woman, smiled, and said that it was a gift for her. He held Yukito's head. The girls turned away, and the orcs, pleased with the spectacle, laughed. And only the old orc remained serious. She calmed down and sat back on the throne. Raverna said that adventurers were so stupid and asked about their weapons. Suddenly, Yukito opened his eyes and asked which of them was stupid. The material falls off, and it turns out it was in the bag. He got out of the bag and rushed at the woman. He grabbed the dagger and brought it to her throat. The woman got angry and looked at the orc who was holding Yukito. She noticed something strange in his gaze. The orc was under the Charm Person spell. The charmed creature will consider the caster a close friend. When the spell wears off, the creature will realize it was charmed. The old man orders to save the lady, but the girls easily remove their chains and strike the orcs. The girls stood surrounded by orcs, ready to attack. The orcs rushed at the girls. But Yukito ordered everyone to stop. He held Raverna captive with a knife to her throat. He shouts at them that his blade is covered with a deadly poison. The orcs immediately stop. Everything turned out exactly as Yukito imagined. He knew that the orcs value Raverna very much. The woman reached into her pocket, but found nothing there. The guy pulls out an amulet and asks if this is what she's looking for. She's shocked and asks when he managed to steal it. Since the woman was a religious class, she could not use magic without an amulet. Raverna gritted her teeth and asked if Yukito came from the evil temple. The orcs looked at him angrily, and Yukito told everyone that he had come to discuss the possibility of an alliance with them. Raverna, originally a princess of a small country in the depths of the underground, then she devoted herself to Zoa-Ji-Yu High and escaped from her kingdom. She teamed up with Shimiza and settled in an underground cave, but was defeated. She then escaped with the orcs to an abandoned castle. The orcs ask again, as if they didn't hear Yukito. Raverna sarcastically remarks that after everything they've done, of course they would agree. Yukito remarks that she would hardly allow him to join her table for good. The priestess orders the attack to be stopped, but the old man tries to argue with her, worried for her life. She calms them down, saying that the adventurers themselves understand perfectly well that if they kill her, they will not be able to leave the palace alive. Yukito and the old man look at each other for a long time with hostility. The old man gives the order to retreat. They drag away the orc who brought Yukito. The orcs slowly closed the door to the throne room, but their eyes were sad. Until the door closed, the girls stood in a fighting stance. As soon as the door closed and they were alone, the girls immediately exhaled and fell to the floor. Raverna asked if everything was okay, to which the guy answered yes. The woman felt the dark energy coming from Yukito, and by saying it out loud, she slightly puzzled the girls and the guy. Raverna thought about Yukito confronting the evil temple, but she was more interested in learning Yukito's identity. She asked him about his connection to the evil temple. Yukito confirms that he is an enemy of the evil temple, and since Raverna is also their enemy, he suggests uniting against the common enemy. The woman smiled and noted that there were only 3 of them to confront the evil temple. She also reminded them of the black dragon that lived in that temple. Yukito tells how the 3 of them were able to kill the Goblin King. The princess turns around sharply and anxiously states that this is impossible. Yukito hands her something. He shows the ring of protection that the Goblin King had. Yukito returns the ring to her, and she takes it with trepidation. It was the ring that confirmed her belonging to the royal family. However, a goblin stole it from her when the underground temple collapsed. She clutches the ring to herself and sobs, tears streaming from her eyes. Then, calming down, the princess turned to the adventurers and proudly declared that if they were going to talk, she was ready to listen to them. Yukito asked her to show them something. They descend the long staircase. The princess walked in front, and Charlotte, holding a lamp, walked last. Yukito held the dagger over the princess's back. Finally, they stopped at the door and opened it. They entered a huge library with statues of winged monsters at the entrance. Charlotte looked at one of them, and Lumilia looked at a skull with horns. This room had such an evil aura that the girls noticed it right away. Yukito had a feeling that if he suddenly used an evil detection spell, the entire room would sparkle. Raverna took out a scroll and placed it on the table. In front of them was a map of the Zoa-Ji-Yu High Temple. Yukito immediately grabbed it and began to study it. This was exactly what the hero and his companions needed, as the dungeon structures were not recorded in the Book of the World. The old way of creating maps could only be used against creatures like goblins. Raverna informed them that this map would most likely not help them. The followers of the evil temple can change Zoa-Ji-Yu High as they please, and change the location of the traps. Yukito was upset, but at least this way they would have a rough idea of the layout. Charlotte notices that the end of the dungeon is connected to an underground lake. Yukito believes that the dragon's lair is there. Charlotte asked about the approximate location of the prisoners, and the guy began to think about it. The 3 of them, leaning over the map, discussed their further actions among themselves. The woman looked at them and realized that they were seriously planning to attack the Temple of Evil. She stared at Yukito and could not understand the guy's true intentions. Of course, her enemy's enemies are her friends. However, she still doubted whether to trust them or not, remembering the betrayal of the Goblin King. And then the princess thought about the fact that he had returned the ring to her. Raverna blushed. She began to scold herself for her feelings, remembering how cruelly Yukito treated her. And she, meanwhile, is the princess of the underground depths. Yukito was looking at the map and suddenly looked up, catching the princess's gaze, causing the princess to blush even more. She yelled at him, asking what this impudent man wanted. Lumilia and Yukito looked at the princess questioningly, and finally Yukito asked if it was the black dragon who united the Temple of Evil in a dream. The princess replied that the dragon is a kind of god for them, who protects them. But in fact, the leader of the followers is an elf druid. She said his name was Jaraza. At that moment, Lumilia screamed. Everyone started asking what was going on and if she knew him. Charlotte hugged her and Lumilia started talking. Jaraza, a long-haired blonde elf, was her older brother. At this time, in the underground temple, the Temple of Evil, many people in black robes are walking. Jaraza stands in front of the sacrificial altar, with a dog sitting at his feet. The dog eats something, and Jaraza says that the time has come and soon the goddess of darkness will descend to them. The dog continues to eat when Jaraza addresses him, saying that it is very exciting, calling the animal Monogram. Many candles were lit. On the altar lay a girl, chained and unconscious. It was Yukito's little sister.